Benjamin stood speechless, his heart racing as Celia leaned in close, her smiling eyes and the warmth of her palms against his felt overwhelming. For a man who had spent years as a chaste warrior, firmly believing his heart was a fortress, he suddenly felt dangerously vulnerable. Calm down, he told himself. Increase your defenses, Benjamin. He took a deep breath, trying to maintain a mask of composure. I have a small question, he managed to say. Celia tilted her head, her hand still clasped firmly in his. Why? Benjamin gestured to their joined hands. Do we have to talk like this? A subtle, sad expression flickered across Celia's face. Don't you like it? She whispered. Benjamin's heart skipped a beat. Damn it, he screamed internally, fighting the urge to be swayed like a schoolboy. He reminded himself of his purpose, the dream of being a chivalrous knight. Slowly, his breathing stabilized. The rhythm returned. He looked directly into her pale red eyes and spoke in a deep, steady voice. Celia, something is wrong with you. Celia looked confused, reaching out her other hand to touch his arm. Is it that you don't like me treating you like this? If you say that, I will be sad. Her voice softened to a whisper. The me of the past was too pretentious, but the woman in front of you now, this is the real me. She seemed so sincere, but then for a fleeting second, her pupils flashed a deep blue-green. It was so fast it felt like an illusion, reminding Benjamin of Chesvia and the terrifying power of the pale goddess. The spell was broken. Benjamin's heart found its peace. Celia, he said firmly, you should be able to guess why I came to the Southern Territory, the conflict between you and Finn. I am not here to judge, but the kingdom is on the verge of collapse. The dead are devouring everything, and yet you are putting on this show in the South. He paused, his gaze turning cold. You might think I'm blaming you, and you're right, I am. In that instant, cracks appeared in Celia's composure. Her expression shifted through surprise, hurt, and confusion before settling into a hollow smile. Asking such an insensitive question in this atmosphere, she sighed, letting go of his hand and leaning against the balcony railing. You really went too far. She spoke of the war as if it were a triviality, claiming she had sent goodwill signals to Finn that were ignored. Her casual tone made Benjamin's skin crawl. If your presence creates an opportunity, she concluded, I'd be happy to talk with him. With that, she vanished into the night. As soon as she was gone, three figures emerged from behind the stone pillars: Walter, Aphrodite, and Percival. They had been eavesdropping the entire time. Did you enjoy peeking? Benjamin asked dryly. Walter turned bright red, stammering an apology, while Aphrodite shrugged. You knew we were there anyway, but seriously, why did she leave? Did you say something, Wr? Benjamin didn't answer. He was thinking about the moment before she left. He had tried to reach out with his spiritual mind blade, not to attack, but to sense her true thoughts. But he had found nothing. For the first time in his life, he was unable to connect. It wasn't a rejection. It was as if there was nothing there to connect to at all. Celia's heart was a storm of turmoil. The walk back from the terrace, the silence of her room, the cold stare of the ceiling, it all intensified the turbulence within. Those affectionate gestures from Benjamin, those warm words, they weren't supposed to happen. That wasn't my intention, she whispered into the dark. But a voice rang out in her mind, mocking and sharp. Was that really not your intention? Your heart was pounding when you held his hand. Celia trembled. She finally realized the truth. This wasn't a second personality or a divine revelation. It was an evil spirit, a parasite influencing her every move. Shut up, Celia hissed through clenched teeth. Don't judge the friendship between me and Benjamin. She clung to her memories, the way Benjamin's hands had laid out blankets for her, the way they had received her golden shields. These were hers. The spirit could not have them. Then let's assume it's what I want to do, *, the voice drifted ethereally. Look how adorable his expression is. Celia flushed with pure rage. You must not kiss him. The spirit chuckled. I didn't kiss him. You're the one who wanted to do this, aren't you? The conversation shifted to Finn, and Celia's stomach twisted with guilt and resentment. She wanted to win him back, but she remembered the look in his eyes, the utter distrust. It was her fault. She had been weak, letting the spirit make choices for her because of her own pride. She would rather Benjamin kill her than cause more disaster. Don't be sad, *, the voice suddenly softened, turning chillingly sweet. Anyway, your brother will only get worse. Celia's eyes widened. What did you say? Silence followed, only her own ragged breathing filled the room. Meanwhile, at a guerrilla camp near Hurricane City, Finn sat before a flickering campfire. A weary messenger from the Earth Mother Church stood opposite him, his voice trembling with suppressed anger. She destroyed the temple, the man claimed. Princess Celia, she released the demons. A steady stream of undead poured out after she left. Finn looked at the man, the radiant Celia connected to the deadborn. No one will believe that. But it is the truth, the man insisted. We can only rely on you, Lord Finn. Finn stared into the flames. Celia's prestige was too high, any accusation would look like slander, but then he picked up a document. Benjamin is here, Finn said quietly, the Baron of Frosttown. He has met with Celia. The messenger looked confused. Is that a turning point? Yes, Finn replied, his eyes reflecting the dancing F. Ire, that man's appearance could change everything. Admit it, you are not good enough. The voice returned, slicing through the heavy silence of the study. Alkia dropped his documents, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on his shoulders. It was everywhere now, haunting his governance, his meals, and his restless, waking hours. The royal bloodline of Alkia carried a dark secret, a curse of evil spirits. But Alkia, the chosen king, the man destined to lead the kingdom of Windwind to glory, refused to believe he was as weak as his ancestors. I feel not as good as Benjamin Blackwood, the voice whispered with a mocking edge. Alkia's temple throbbed. Stop mentioning that man, I do not even know him. Don't know him? The spirit laughed. He rose from the son of a serf to greatness, and you, a prince born with a silver spoon, yet you cannot even reclaim your own capital. I unified the West, Alkia roared, slamming his fist onto the desk. Those nobles are foxes, it took immense effort. Benjamin took 3 years to lead his people, the voice countered coolly. He builds armies and communes, you just cling to your title and your inferiority. Driven to the brink of madness, Alkia dismissed his concerned guards. A new, desperate resolve took root. He had to see this Benjamin Blackwood for himself. He had to know what kind of man could make even a demon compare a king to a commoner. Meanwhile, beneath a moonlit sky, the wind howled against the stone battlements of Hurricane City. A cloaked figure struggled against the gale until a rough hand pulled him to safety. You are insane, the guard captain hissed, his eyes darting around the shadows. Celia is back. If you are discovered, Finn, you are dead. Finn pulled back his hood, letting his long, golden hair catch the breeze. He looked out over the twinkling lights of the city, a man burdened by the weight of being a symbol. I cannot hold back anymore, Finn said, his voice steady despite the danger. I have made mistakes in the South. I have been a leader who realized his errors too late, but not this time. The captain pleaded with him to stay safe, calling him the banner of their cause, but Finn only shook his head. Tell me where Benjamin is, Finn commanded. The turning point is here, I will not wait. With a heavy sigh, the captain relented, pointing toward a mansion in the east guarded by the soldiers of Frosttown. Finn nodded, pulled his hood low, and vanished into the night, 2 men, worlds apart, now drawn toward the same inevitable shadow, Benjamin Blackwood. Finn moved with the calculated grace of a predator. Once inside the city walls, he wasted no time, navigating the route toward the 3-story mansion where Benjamin was staying. It wasn't a palace, but its location was prime. Dim light flickered from the windows, a sign that the Baron was still awake. Finn melted into the shadows to observe. The security was tight. Soldiers in southern border uniforms stood alongside the elite guards of Frosttown, men who stood straighter, their eyes sharper. Infiltration was the only way. If Celia, Upton, or the southern nobles discovered him here, the fallout would be catastrophic. He circled to the rear, found a cracked window, and pried it open with his dagger. He slipped inside, landing in a deserted corridor with a silence that defied gravity. Suddenly, footsteps. Finn reacted instantly, bracing his limbs against the walls and hoisting himself to the ceiling. A guard passed directly beneath him, never looking up. Once the coast was clear, Finn dropped down and moved forward, his mind racing. What do I say to Benjamin? Long time no see. No, too ordinary. Is Celia all right? Too abrupt. Lost in thought, he rounded a corner and bang. He collided head-on with another man. 2 bottles of liquor flew into the air. In a blur of motion, Finn caught one, the stranger caught the other. They stood frozen, staring at one another for 3 long seconds. The stranger, a man Finn recognized as Aphrodite, a supposedly formidable bishop, spoke first, his voice defensive. I was just getting these for the Baron to celebrate. It wasn't my idea." Finn nodded slowly. "I know, you don't need to explain." But as Finn tried to pass, Aphrodite's tone turned playful and dangerous. "Sneaking around in a cloak at midnight, you wouldn't be here to assassinate the Baron, would you?" He struck a confident pose. "Do you think you can hide from a master of stealth like me?" Finn was unimpressed. Benjamin's men are so rude. "I am his partner," Aphrodite corrected, his eyes narrowing. "And right now he is busy with a distinguished guest, Princess Celia." Finn froze. "Celia here, the risk was too high. I'll come another day," Finn muttered, turning to leave. Trying to escape, Aphrodite barked. He lunged. Finn dodged a flurry of punches, fast, accurate, and ruthless. They exchanged 8 lightning-fast blows in the narrow hall before springing apart. Finn's breathing quickened. This man was no mere priest. Aphrodite settled into a fighting stance, his lazy demeanor gone. "You are no ordinary assassin," he hissed. "An ordinary man would be dead on the floor by now." Aphrodite took a step back and struck a bizarre, unsettling pose. With his left hand pointing to the sky and his right hand pointing to the ground, knees bent and body leaning forward, he looked like a frog preparing to pounce. "Whoever you are," he declared with sudden, soaring confidence, "come and see what I have to offer." His voice rose 8 octaves, echoing through the corridor. "Spirit garden fighting technique." Finn opened his mouth to explain that he wasn't there to fight, that he only wanted to see Benjamin, but Aphrodite didn't give him the chance. A powerful flying kick came whistling through the air. The movement was ridiculously fast, completely at odds with his long, dramatic posing. Finn jumped back, but he was a beat too slow. A dusty shoe print appeared on his stomach. It wasn't an injury, but it was an insult. Finn looked down at the mark, then up at Aphrodite. "You," he muttered, "lack martial ethics." Aphrodite didn't care. He charged forward in a flurry of punches, lefts, rights, uppercuts, a dazzling, chaotic display. Finn retreated again and again. This wasn't a technique, it was a street fight. No, it was more arbitrary than that, yet every punch was incredibly fast and accurate. As Finn dodged, his mind raced. He knew Celia was nearby, having a hot chat with Benjamin. He couldn't let her seduce Benjamin before he could deliver his warning. His eyes narrowed. He spotted an opening, grabbed Aphrodite's arm, and prepared to strike the joint. Aphrodite broke into a cold sweat. Sensing the danger, he delivered another desperate kick to Finn's stomach. Finn was forced to let go, jumping back to create distance. "Get out of the way," Finn commanded. Aphrodite refused. Finn stopped holding back. He charged like an arrow released from a bow. The skills he had honed on the brink of death were terrifying to behold. He blocked Aphrodite's first punch, the second, the third grazed his shoulder, and the fourth. The fourth punch sent Aphrodite flying. He spun through the air and crashed heavily to the floor. Guards rushed into the corridor, shouting for the intruder to be seized. 3 seconds later, all 5 guards lay on the ground, groaning in pain. Finn clapped the dust from his hands and continued walking. Suddenly, a new hand landed on Aphrodite's shoulder. "Leave the rest to me," Percival said, walking past his fallen comrade. He drew a gleaming, exquisite sword. "Give it your all," he told Finn. "I'm not like that guy." Finn drew his own weapon, a worn, nicked short sword. "This is considered a sword?" Percival asked, frowning. Finn sighed. "Why do the people around Benjamin talk so much nonsense? Can't you say anything of value?" Percival smiled coldly. "Your mouth looks a lot like Benjamin's, but you're not quite as annoying." The corridor fell into a heavy silence. The 2 men stood just a few steps apart, eyes locked, waiting for the first move. Percival was a master of the Templar Knights, a man whose swordsmanship was forged in the Holy Spring territory. He had sparred with the greatest, even holding his own against the senior knight Reinaldo, but as he faced Finn, he realized he was staring at an insurmountable mountain. Finn's blade moved with the elegance of a dance, seamless, precise, and hauntingly alive. Every one of Percival's strikes was blocked before it even began. With 3 powerful slashes, Percival forced a momentary gap and retreated to the side of his comrade, Aphrodite. It was only then that he felt a sudden chill. He looked down to find a shallow bloodstain on his bared arm. He hadn't even felt the steel bite. Finn stood perf, CTLY composed, sheathing his sword with a calm, terrifying ease. When Aphrodite mockingly offered to take over, Percival snapped, "Shut up." He would hold back no longer. Blue-white electricity began to crackle across Percival's body, the sign of the Nen blade. As the corridor flickered with lightning, Aphrodite warned the guards to fall back. Percival took a deep breath, focusing his power to enhance his speed beyond mortal limits. With a thunderous crack, the floorboards shattered and Percival vanished, reappearing as a blur of steel aimed at Finn's chest. The blade pierced through, but Percival's heart sank. Finn's body became transparent, a mere illusion. In a heartbeat, Finn appeared to the right, then behind him. Percival unleashed a burst of electricity to char anything in reach, but Finn was already 4 steps away, untouched. Percival realized the grim truth. His opponent was a fellow chosen one, and he was losing. "You can all come at me together," Finn said coldly. "I'm in a hurry." Aphrodite erupted. Massive, spear-like thorns burst from the walls and floor, sealing Finn's escape, while Percival lunged with a high overhead strike. They moved in perfect unison. Yet Finn did not move. Instead, 4 identical figures of Finn appeared simultaneously, striking from every angle. Bang! Both Percival and Aphrodite were sent flying into the walls. Coughing up blood, Percival realized the secret. It's an echo. Those phantoms are replicas of his past actions. As the 3 prepared for a final, desperate clash, a stern voice echoed around the corner. "Are you planning to demolish this place?" Benjamin stepped into view, surveying the wreckage of the corridor. Beside him stood a woman with shimmering white hair. At the sight of her, Finn's entire body tensed. Celia. The name surged through his mind, and for the first time, the Master of Echoes held his breath. Before the fighting, before the thorns, and before the lightning, the mansion was silent. A single wall lamp swayed in the night breeze, casting long shadows down the quiet corridor. Upstairs, in a room filled with the scent of tea and sugar, Benjamin sat opposite Celia. He felt off balance. He had spent weeks rehearsing a speech to convince her to leave the Southern Territory, deleting and revising every word to be precise and powerful. But then, she simply appeared. She wore a dress of soft, flowing lines that glowed gently in the candlelight. When she tilted her head and asked if he was happy to see her, Benjamin could only stammer a reply. They sat alone. Celia had brought snacks from the most famous bakery in Hurricane City, chatting effortlessly about the scenery and the people she had met. She seemed natural, like a neighbor rather than a long-lost comrade, but Benjamin was troubled. He tried repeatedly to connect with her using his psychic blade, but he hit an invisible wall every time. It wasn't resistance, it was a total inability to connect. She was acting like a character from a romance novel, growing closer and more affectionate, yet she wasn't the Celia he remembered. The woman who once led their team with iron resolve was gone, replaced by this strange, playful version of herself. "Celia," Benjamin interrupted, his voice serious. "Come with me to the royal territory. They need you more than the South does." Celia went still. She looked down at the calluses on her hands, reminders of years of swordplay, and whispered, "If you said that you needed me, I might go right now." Her tone suddenly sharpened, turning aggressive. She accused him of finding new companions, of being tired of her. "They only see me as a convenient woman," she spat. Before Benjamin could respond, **** bang. A violent crash echoed from downstairs. Benjamin swept his senses through the mansion. He felt the presence of Aphrodite, Percival, and then his heart stopped. Finn was here and he was fighting. Benjamin urged Celia to leave through the back stairs, desperate to keep her and Finn apart, but Celia only smiled that unsettling smile. "Don't be embarrassed," she said. "I'll help you. After all, I am a convenient woman." She pushed past him into the hallway. Now the present, the air in the corridor is frozen solid. Finn and Celia stand just steps apart, locked in a silent stare. Aphrodite leans against the wall, bruised, while Percival bleeds from his lip. "Long time no see," Celia says, her voice bright and airy. She suggests they all sit for tea and turn the page on the past, claiming nothing is more important than their unbreakable friendship. The words hit Finn like a physical blow. His breathing turns rapid, his knuckles whitening as he grips his sword. He looks at her pale red eyes, his voice a low, dangerous hiss. Do you even know what you are saying?" Celia only tilts her head. "Of course I do." Watching them, Benjamin feels a cold weight sink in his chest. He has only one thought: it's over. The cruel memories consumed Finn once again. dragging him back to the faces of those who had followed him into the abyss. He saw the dead lost in the green riverlands or crushed under Celia's iron fist, and he saw the living hiding like animals in the swamps, all because they were labeled rebels. All because of him. Finn's gaze locked onto Celia. She stood there with a nonchalant, mocking smile that seemed to erase the gravity of their blood-soaked past. In an instant, the world around them vanished. The corridor, Aphrodite, Percival, and Benjamin all faded into a blur. To Finn, the woman before him was no longer human. She was a demon. His hand moved, a flicker so small it was nearly invisible. A throwing knife hissed from his sleeve at a terrifying speed. It aimed straight for Celia's forehead, but stopped just before the skin. Celia had caught the hilt out of thin air. She tilted her head, her voice light and cheerful. "That's a really warm at it. You'd," she teased, "but I'm worried it might scare Benjamin." Benjamin's plea for calm fell on deaf ears. Finn lunged, closing the distance in a heartbeat. A flash of sword light aimed for her throat, but Celia dodged, the blade grazing her neck without breaking a single hair. With a playful whisper in Benjamin's ear, she drew the sword from his waist and stepped into the fray. The corridor erupted into a torrential downpour of clashing steel. The movements were so fast they became a dazzling net of light, yet miraculously Benjamin stood in the center of the chaos, untouched. Every strike precisely avoided him. Suddenly, a crisp asterisk click echoed. Finn's old, notched blade finally shattered. Celia didn't hesitate. She swung for his neck, but the blade passed through air. It was an echo. The real Finn had already snatched a spear from a nearby guard, thrusting with a whistling, fierce intensity. Celia merely stirred the air with her sword, blocking every strike. "You used the Nen blade first," she laughed, "because you're not as good as me." "Shut up," Finn growled. Behind her, a second Finn appeared, a physical echo of his past movements. Celia was caught in a pincer attack, a spear at her heart and a sword at her back. At the very last microsecond, she arched her body, dodging the blade and thrusting forward to force Finn back, while simultaneously kicking the echo into nothingness. The onlookers stood frozen in shock. This was a level of combat beyond anything they had ever witnessed. Finn's breathing grew heavy as Celia snatched his spear with her bare hands and snapped the wood like a dry twig. "I can play all day," she said, kicking a hole through the wall and leaping into the moonlight below. Finn hesitated, looking at Benjamin one last time. "Celia is not to be trusted," he warned. "She brought the dead from the temple of the Earth Mother." Then he followed her into the night. High above, Benjamin, Aphrodite, and Percival stood at the edge of the broken wall, watching the two figures continue their deadly dance in the silver glow below. The battle between Celia and Finn was even more intense than the clash upstairs. They had completely let go of their inhibitions. Under the cold moonlight, they moved with astonishing speed, appearing to onlookers like two shooting stars constantly colliding with the earth. Each strike sparked, each separation produced a sharp, violent whoosh. Finn held a curved scimitar in each hand, weaving an impenetrable curtain of blades. Celia fought back with Benjamin's sword, wielding it with effortless skill. She moved through the light of the blades, advancing, retreating, never falling behind. Upstairs, three figures watched through a jagged hole in the wall. Aphrodite's mouth hung open. "Have I been fighting against an opponent like this the whole time?" he stammered. Beside him, Percival was silently calculating. He realized that if he joined the fray now, surviving for even 20 seconds would be a victory. Benjamin stood at the front, his gaze darting between the two combatants, his mind racing with a hidden decision. Downstairs, the fighting continued. Celia spoke with a light, conversational tone. "Finn, what did you say to Benjamin before you came down? I'm curious." Finn scoffed, his twin swords moving even faster. "Want to know? Go ask him yourself." "I'm just worried," Celia replied, forcing Finn back with a precise thrust, "that you'll try to drive a wedge between us. That is unforgivable." Finn's eyes changed. He stopped holding back. Suddenly, the two figures on the ground became 20. These were his echoes, projections of every path he had traversed. 20 Finns surged forward, their blades forming a deadly net. A strand of Celia's hair was shorn off. A sleeve was slashed. "He will never trust someone as suspicious as you," Finn's voice echoed from the shadows. "You've colluded with the Deadborn." Celia's composed smile vanished. For a heartbeat, she looked anxious, helpless. Then her pupils contracted into a deep, eerie blue-green. As Finn's blade grazed her shoulder, she brushed away a drop of blood. "If it leaves a scar," she whispered wistfully, "Benjamin will regret it." Suddenly, an explosive, invisible pressure emanated from her, spreading across the entire city. Aphrodite's legs went weak. Percival turned pale. Celia raised her sword. Executed. The word resounded through the night. In an instant, the dozens of echoes vanished like mist in the wind. Only the real Finn remained, buckled under an invisible mountain of force. His internal organs felt as if they were being torn apart, but he did not fall. He gripped his hilt, teeth gritted, waiting for his final trump card. Celia began to walk toward him, then she suddenly froze. Her smile turned to confusion. Upstairs, Benjamin had slumped against Aphrodite. His eyes were empty, lifeless. "Hey," Aphrodite whispered, "what's wrong with you?" There was no response. Benjamin had used the moment of Celia's execution to strike. He had established a mental connection, plunging his soul into the fray. Downstairs, the two figures stood motionless in the dust, locked in a silent, psychic stalemate. Benjamin opened his eyes to a world of impossible beauty. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in golden, dappled patterns, and the air hummed with the melody of a distant stream. It was a fairy tale. Scattered throughout the woods were his companions. Finn knelt by the creek, drinking from his cupped hands, while Livia wandered past with a basket of wild berries, offering a gentle, silent nod. Benjamin's expression remained cold. His gaze swept past them, locking onto his true target, Princess Celia. She was huddled before a crooked, collapsing tent, her face pinched with worry. As Benjamin approached, she looked up, a flicker of panic crossing her features as she tried, unsuccessfully, to hide her failure. I had planned to have this ready before you arrived," she whispered, her head bowing in embarrassment. Benjamin watched her. "The inner and outer layers are reversed," he said flatly. He began to list the technical flaws, the angles of the ground nails, the tension of the ropes. Celia's eyes shone with sudden, intense admiration. "As expected of you," she breathed. She stepped forward, resting her head against his shoulder like a docile kitten. "Without you, I don't know what would have become of me." The forest was silent, the breeze was sweet, but Benjamin did not embrace her. Instead, he pushed her away. "Stop pretending," he commanded. He looked around at the perfect scene, seeing the cracks. The flowers were blooming out of season. Finn had been repeating the same drinking motion for minutes. Ella was holding her book upside down. It was a simulation, a world with untested bugs. "Goddess of magic," Benjamin said, his voice hardening, "or should I call you the goddess of the dead?" The girl's expression froze, then melted into a sharp, knowing smile. "Your observation skills are truly sharp," she mused. As she spoke, the forest began to rot. The sun faded and his friends vanished into the gray. She admitted to raiding his mind, peering into his memories of other worlds and games. "No wonder Pale values you so much," she teased. "Leave her body," Benjamin hissed. The entity tilted Celia's head cutely. "I'm afraid I can't, but aren't you afraid I'll keep you here, permanently?" The world began to warp and collapse. As Benjamin's consciousness was violently ejected, he threw out one final vow: "You are my enemy, just you wait." Suddenly, Benjamin gasped, snapping back into reality at the mansion. He broke free from support, his eyes snapping open to see the real Celia standing motionless below. "Take down Celia," he roared. Walter did not hesitate. He drew his steel, leading the soldiers of Frost Town in a desperate charge under the cold, unforgiving moonlight. Confusion and suspicion hung heavy in the air. Aphrodite stared blankly at Benjamin, unable to process why he had suddenly ordered the arrest of their ally, Celia. Even Percival, usually stoic, was puzzled, yet he knew Benjamin was not a man to descend into madness without reason. Finn knelt on the ground, his hand tight on his scimitar. He didn't understand the order, but his instinct was simple: fight first, talk later. But for Walter and the elite soldiers of Frosttown, there was no hesitation. Their loyalty to the Baron was absolute. If Benjamin ordered a member of the royal family taken down, they would obey. 50 men moved as one, their boots creating a rhythmic drumbeat under the moonlight. Celia watched them charge, her confusion melted into a sharp, mocking sneer. "Benjamin," she called out to the figure on the balcony above, "why are you doing this? I am on your side." Benjamin remained silent, his gaze cold and unwavering. He was watching for it. Waiting for her to use that terrifying power, execution once again. The air hissed as steam-powered repeating crossbows fired. Celia blurred into motion, dodging bolts and parrying steel with lethal grace. But Walter's men were a wall of disciplined iron. They hemmed her in, spears and shields working in perfect synchronization. Suddenly, Celia stopped. The madness vanished from her face, replaced by genuine bewilderment. "What happened?" she whispered, looking at the blades leveled at her throat. "Benjamin, why are your soldiers attacking me?" Seeing the immense sadness in her eyes, Benjamin realized the truth. The real Celia had returned. "Celia, cease resistance," he shouted. "If you trust me, stop." She hesitated, a glimmer of hope in her eyes, but Finn and Walter, fearing a trick, pressed the attack. The pressure was too much. As they closed in, the light in Celia's eyes shifted, a deep, sickly green rekindled. "What a cruel heart," she hissed. With a burst of unnatural speed, she leaped toward the balcony. Aphrodite and Percival moved to intercept, but black and white flames erupted on their arms, freezing them in place. Celia slipped past, landing inches from Benjamin. "I know you were waiting for me to use execution again," she whispered with a haunting smile. "I know you so well, my dear, so guess where I am going next." Before he could strike, she vanished into the night. Benjamin didn't waste a second. He knew exactly where she was heading. "Aphrodite, Percival, Finn, with me to the Grand Duke's castle," he turned to Walter. "Take the men. Inform the city that the princess is an impostor. We end this tonight." As they raced through the dark, Aphrodite muttered, "My brain can't process this. How did an assassin hunt turn into a revolution?" "With your brain," Percival snapped, though he was just as shaken. "It is hard to explain." Benjamin's voice cut through the wind, grim and determined. "No more talk, we finish this now." On his way to the castle, Benjamin encountered his first wave of obstacles. A squad of 40 soldiers from the southern border rushed from a side road, blocking the street. Their armor gleamed coldly in the moonlight, and their spears were all leveled at Benjamin's group. The leading captain raised his hand, shouting, "Halt! By order of the princess, we are here to stop anyone from going to the castle. You traitors, do not even think about taking another step." Benjamin reined in his horse. He looked at the soldiers, at the wariness and hostility on their faces, and his mind raced. Percival moved closer, whispering urgently, "What do we do? If we fight back, it will confirm your guilt." Benjamin's lips curved into a sharp smile. "I would not mind accepting this charge at all." He raised his hand. Behind him, the soldiers of Frosttown were already in position, leveling their steam-powered repeating crossbows. "Fire!" Benjamin's voice was quiet, yet it reached every ear. Swish, 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 arrows rained down. The southern soldiers had expected negotiations, but Benjamin had no time for formalities. In the first volley, half the front row fell. By the third round, the survivors were fleeing in terror. Benjamin dismounted and seized a Frosttown flag. He waved it vigorously, the fabric cutting a wide arc through the night air. "Frosttown," he roared. "We cannot ignore this crumbling kingdom. All of you, come at me." As southern archers fired from the shadows, Benjamin simply raised his hand. Using his intention, he froze the arrows midair. They hovered, perfectly still, before Benjamin sent them flying back to incapacitate his attackers. Beside him, Aphrodite squatted and pressed his hands to the earth. "The thorn of rejection," he cried. The ground shook as massive, living thorns burst forth, overturning obstacles and carving a path toward the castle. "Forward," Benjamin commanded, remounting his horse. Amidst the chaos, Benjamin spotted a figure leaping across the rooftops with unnatural speed. It was Celia. "Finn!" Benjamin shouted, tossing his elven longbow to his companion. Finn knocked an arrow and fired a shot with deadly precision, but as the arrow reached its mark, Benjamin gasped. Celia didn't dodge, she caught the arrow with her bare hands. She glanced back once, then vanished into the night. "She wants to capture Upton," Benjamin said grimly, "and force the gates open to let the undead in." He remembered his connection with the goddess possessing Celia. She wasn't following a grand strategy, she was merely playing, like a child with ants. Benjamin clenched his fist, his voice low and dangerous. "She will regret it." Deep within the ruins of the Earth Mother Temple, the ground fractures, and the dead begin to swarm. They crawl from fissures opened by Celia, pouring out of passages sealed for centuries. High on a hillside, a lone guerrilla scout watches, his face pale with terror. "It is over," he whispers. "It is over." Despite his fear, he scribbles a frantic note and releases a carrier falcon into the night sky. Faster, he urges, but as he turns to flee, boom, the temple collapses. From the dust, it is not just the walking dead that emerge. Enormous bone wings unfurl as undead wyverns rise, their eye sockets burning with black and white flames. Monsters long thought extinct circle the night, emitting mournful cries. Suddenly the beasts turn, they swoop toward the scout. He realizes he has been discovered. There is no escape. He grips his scimitar and roars a final defiance, but before the first dragon can strike, a dark shadow flashes. The beast is cleaved in two midair, splattering the scout in black liquid. Standing before him is a knight of the dead, clad in crystal-covered armor. The knight turns, his voice hoarse and broken from centuries of silence. "Where is this?" Stunned to find a rational being among the dead, the scout answers, "The conifer." O's Hills to the north is Hurricane City, the seat of the Duke of Upton. The knight falls silent, then commands, "Take me." Seeing the knight effortlessly strike down more monsters, the scout makes his choice. "Okay, I will take you." Meanwhile, at the gates of Hurricane City, the Rose Knights block Benjamin's path. Their leader, Manhwa, stands firm in her red armor. Benjamin pleads with her. "Celia is plotting against the Grand Duke. Let us through." Manhwa mocks him until a massive explosion rocks the castle. Screams echo from within. Benjamin looks at her grimly. "Pick a better coffin for your duke." High on the castle terrace, Celia appears. She holds the terrified Duke Upton by his collar, dangling him over the edge like a helpless chick. Benjamin shouts up to her, "Release the hostage. You are surrounded." Celia merely smiles and cups her hand to her mouth. "I do not think that will work," she demands the city gates be opened. From the crowd below, Finn erupts in a string of creative insults, calling her an idiot who deserves to have her head kicked by a donkey. Celia looks down, her expression unreadable. "Finn," she calls out over the chaos, "your swearing skills are still as bad as ever." Grand Duke Upton, once the powerful ruler of the South, now looked like a pathetic, squawking chick. Held aloft by Celia, his feet kicked wildly in the air while tears and snot streamed down his wrinkled face. "Give her whatever she wants," he shrieked to the soldiers below. "Just make her let me go." The Southern soldiers stood frozen, caught between their duty and the sight of their humiliated master. Manhwa, the Duke's long-serving commander, looked on with a face full of shame. Beside her, Benjamin Blackwood rode forward. "The Duke is old, Manhwa," Benjamin remarked coolly. "Has he not considered abdicating to an heir?" Manhwa let out a bitter, hollow laugh. She revealed the dark scandal of the South. Upton had forced his 6 children to fight to the death to find the strongest successor. The 2 survivors, scarred and broken, eventually rebelled against their father before vanishing forever. Upton's pride had died with his family. "Mind-blowing wisdom," Benjamin muttered sarcastically. Behind him, Percival sneered at the insects running the territory. High above on the terrace, Upton's panic reached a fever pitch. "Blackwood," he screamed, "save me and I will give you anything." Benjamin looked up, his expression unreadable. He turned to his companions, but before a word could be exchanged, Finn stepped forward. Without a sound, the guerrilla leader knocked an arrow and drew his bow. The movement was steady, impossible, outrageous. Zwoosh! The arrow cut through the night air and struck with pinpoint accuracy, driving straight into Upton's right eye. The Duke's body convulsed once, then went limp. A deathly silence fell over Frosttown. "Revenge," Finn's voice echoed through the stillness, "for the massacre of my Eoples." Manhwa lunged forward in a rage, but Benjamin stepped in her path, blocking her blade. On the terrace, the entity inhabiting Celia's body tossed the Duke's corpse aside like a bored child discarding a toy. She looked inward, mocking the real Celia, who was huddled, weeping in the corners of her own mind. "Don't blame me," the entity whispered cruelly. "I am only doing what you were too afraid to do." The creature, now in total control, drew 2 blades, the town sword and the execution sword. She raised them toward the dark sky, and an oppressive, otherworldly pressure crushed the city. "So many ants," she sighed, her voice echoing with terrifying power, "and yet you accomplish so little." The air grew heavy, thick with the suffocating pressure of Celia's psychic blades. On the castle terrace, she stood like a god of war, her presence weighing so heavily on the soldiers that veins bulged on their foreheads and warhorses neighed in a frantic, wild terror. Below, Aphrodite crossed his arms, tilting his chin up with a mask of false confidence. "She's got guts," he remarked to Benjamin, trying to take us all on at once. Benjamin didn't look away from the figure on the terrace. He knew Celia's strength better than anyone. She was the undisputed power of the kingdom of Renfeng, but now, possessed by the dead goddess of magic, she was something more. Finn rode up, his face grim. "Have your soldiers back off," he warned. "Numbers mean nothing against her. I have experience. If you aren't strong enough to stand before her, you are merely a liability." Benjamin hesitated. "What if I use the steam-powered repeating crossbows?" "It's no use," Finn interrupted. Before another word could be spoken, Celia moved. She didn't wait for their strategy. She leaped, a falling star trailing cold light, straight toward Benjamin. "Protect the lords!" the soldiers of Frosttown cried, slamming their steel-reinforced shields together to form a wall. But they weren't the first to meet her. The Rose Knights, valiant and proud, intercepted her midair. 5 spears thrust forward in perfect, deadly unison. Celia didn't even blink. With a single blinding arc of her blade, all 5 knights were swept from their saddles. Their horses bolted in terror as the men hit the dust. 3 more charged. Celia thrust her sword once, piercing the leader's chest before he could even react. 2 more swings, and 2 more knights fell. Their armor offered no more protection than wet paper. "I'll be your opponent," a voice rang out. Brynhua descended in gleaming red armor, her 12 enchanted longswords hovering around her like the petals of a lethal rose. Celia paused, a flicker of interest in her pale blue eyes. "If you can maintain your spirit while facing me, I will consider you." "Arrogant," Brynhua hissed. She waved her hand, and the 12 swords hissed through the air like serpents. Celia's movements were a blur of terrifying efficiency. She par. Wide 4, deflected 3, stepped past 2, and kicked another away. As the final blade lunged for her eye, she caught the steel between her teeth, then spat it aside with a contemptuous flick of her head. Brynhua, pale and trembling, sent the swords in again, this time in calculated waves. Celia simply stepped forward. 1 strike sent the first wave embedding into distant stone. A second strike scattered the next. Without even turning around, she reached her blade backward, tapping the final swords so precisely they collided with one another and clattered uselessly to the ground. Celia stood still, having moved barely 3 steps. She looked at the defeated knight with pity. "This can't even be called a dance," she whispered. "It is just a simple, juggling act." The gap in power was so vast it felt like despair. Brynhua watched the pale pink figure of Celia drift toward Benjamin, and her mind went blank. Celia's speed, her terrifying, effortless grace amidst a storm of 12 blades, was simply beyond human. Brynhua struggled to her feet, gripping the last intact sword. She was the captain of the Rose Knights. Even if she couldn't win, she refused to die on her knees. With a ragged breath, she charged. Celia's blade swung for her neck, but then whoosh. An arrow hissed through the air. Celia caught it with one hand, barely looking. "You still like catching arrows," Benjamin's voice drifted from the shadows. He stepped forward, calm amidst the carnage. "I remember you said doing that was cool." Celia turned, a small smile playing on her lips. "I remember you said it was cool, too." The tension was broken by Aphrodite, who assumed a fighting stance. "Let me show you the power of the spirit garden," he roared, rushing into the fray. Benjamin turned to Finn, handing him a glass tube filled with a shimmering, scarlet liquid. "A priceless treasure," Benjamin whispered. "Inject this. It will enhance your Nen blade. Use it when the time is right." Finn looked at the needle, then at Benjamin. "Aren't you afraid I'll use this to kill her?" "I don't want anyone I know to leave," Benjamin replied softly. "That includes you." He then turned to the others, his voice hardening. "I have only one request. Don't die." The battle reignited. Aphrodite, Brynhua, and Percival fought like possessed souls, but Celia was a monster. She wove through their attacks, her movements a blur of pink and steel. She was untouched, not a single drop of sweat on her brow, while the 3 warriors were panting, bleeding, and broken. "When will Benjamin play?" Celia asked, her voice airy and bored. "I can't wait." "I'm right here," Benjamin announced. He walked past his comrades empty-handed, but behind him, hundreds of weapons, swords, spears, and axes rose into the air, hovering like a loyal army. Celia's eyes lit up with a manic joy. She laughed, a sound that echoed through the cold night. "Interesting, very interesting," she raised her twin blades, pointing them at his heart. "Then I should tell you, darling, I have 3 stages, and this was only the first." Aphrodite did not want Benjamin to take the field. To him, it made no sense for the leader of a faction to risk himself on the front lines, but the battle began before he could utter a word of protest. "Lower your head." The voice exploded in Aphrodite's mind. It was Benjamin. He instinctively ducked just as a massive battle axe whistled through the air, narrowly missing him and slamming into the ground with a bone-shaking thud. Benjamin stood a short distance away, arms crossed, his eyes wide and focused. Around him, a dense array of weapons swirled like an army awaiting orders. Through his Nen blade, Benjamin connected every warrior on the field. Tactics and ideas were communicated instantly. A single thought flashed through the group, and everyone moved as one. The chaos of individual fighting vanished, replaced by the precision of a sophisticated machine. Brinwa, draw out the 3 swords to the left. Percival, engage them head-on. Aphrodite, Thorns, prepare for my signal. More than 20 swords shot from behind Benjamin like a rain of metal. Celia flipped backward, dodging the barrage with astonishing speed, but Percival was already there. Enhanced by lightning, he forced her into a brutal head-on confrontation. Now, thorns as thick as human arms burst from the earth, wrapping tightly around Celia's legs. For a fleeting moment, she was pinned. Percival leaped high, swinging his blade down for the finishing blow. We can win, Aphrodite thought, but then the world turned cold. The second phase is here, Benjamin's voice boomed. Get out of the way, everyone, get out. Black and white spiritual flames erupted from Celia. The air condensed into frost and the thorns shattered into ice. Benjamin was too slow to dodge the freezing wave, but a figure suddenly snatched him up, rolling him to safety. When Benjamin looked up, he gasped. It was Celia, but not the one unleashing the flames. This was a pale-haired Echo with eyes full of concern. Finn's Echo. Suddenly, a massive slash carved a trench into the earth, nearly splitting the real Celia in two. Standing before her was another shadow, the knight Calvin, then came Ella. One by one, the echoes of fallen comrades rose from the past. From this moment forward, Finn's voice rang out with calm authority, I will take over this battle. Finn stood alone at the front, backed by the ghosts of those he had loved and lost. His Nen blade had evolved. He was no longer just repeating his own steps, he was summoning the strength of his memories. Celia's eyes flashed with murderous intent, but Finn only looked down at her. Verbal threats, he said coldly, only make you seem weak. For the first time, the goddess felt a real, shivering threat. Finn unleashed his full firepower. He stood alone, yet behind him the air shimmered. Ed with the echoes of the fallen, Celia, Calvin, Ella, and Hill, his comrades once lost, now stood beside him once more. Syria, Finn's voice boomed through the night sky, pay the price for what you've done. 7 figures rushed forward in a dazzling blur. The real Celia swung her longsword, parrying Finn's spear and sidestepping Calvin's greatsword, but the echoes were relentless. I'm on the right path, she screamed, her blade clashing against steel. The price, that is just self-consolation for losers like you. Suddenly, the echo of Celia moved. She raised her sword, whispering a single word, executed. The mental pressure made the real Celia falter just for a heartbeat, but for Calvin's echo, that was enough. He swung a massive greatsword, heavy as a mountain, straight at her chest. Bang! Celia blocked, but the force sent her flying 10 meters. Before she could rise, Hill's echo emerged from the darkness, thrusting twin blades toward her ribs. Simultaneously, Ella's echo condensed molten metal into a giant rapier, aiming for Celia's face. Trapped, Celia's eyes flashed with a lethal glint. Black and white spiritual fire erupted from her soul, engulfing everything. Ella's echo shattered into mist. Hill contorted her body into an ethereal state to survive, but her physical blades remained, grazing Celia's cheeks and leaving 2 bloody trails. Celia lunged, grabbing Hill's echo by the neck. With a sickening asterisk click, the echo faded away. Panting and disheveled, Celia mocked them. Can we still count the sins now? Finn's face turned a deep, furious red. He roared, and the echoes of the 7 horsemen rose again. Even Benjamin's echo appeared. Shut up, the real Benjamin muttered from the sidelines. I'm stacking blood rage on Finn. Sacrificing a teammate grants boundless power, do you understand? Imbued with this dark energy, Finn became unstoppable. He charged, his spear a blur of ferocity. Celia retreated, her voice growing desperate. Are your soldiers really that important? People die every day, can't you just pretend they died in a natural disaster? Shut up, Finn screamed. He lunged too fast. Celia's spiritual fire caught his left arm, freezing it instantly in a block of ice. She moved in for the kill, but a thorn wrapped around her foot. Aphrodite had joined the fray, binding her as Percival's lightning-wrapped sword pierced the air. Finn shattered the ice on his arm and looked up. The scales of victory were tipping. Sensing the end, Celia's gaze locked onto the one figure standing in the distance, Benjamin. Ignoring the thorns, the lightning, and the spears, she threw everything aside. She had only one goal left. She charged straight for Benjamin. "Don't come any closer," Benjamin's voice cracks with desperation as Celia charges toward him like a demon. In his mind, a terrifying vision flashes, a deep, deserted rainforest, 3 months from now, an ending too horrific to contemplate. Age. His hand fumbles at his waist for his last 2 vials of holy blood, the only way to strengthen his psychic blade, but he is too slow. Suddenly, a figure blocks his path. It is Walter. Benjamin is stunned. "Walter, what are you doing?" Walter doesn't answer. He has reached his limit. He has watched everyone, Finn, Aphrodite, Percival, even Benjamin, throw themselves into the fray while he remained behind the scenes, a mere commander of soldiers. He is tired of being the ordinary man, the one without a nen blade, the one who cannot reach those high-level heights. With a roar of defiance, Walter lifts his sword. Bang! Celia's blade crashes against his. The impact is immense, sending both Walter and Benjamin tumbling backward into a pile of debris. Walter stares at his hands, the skin is split, blood flows, and his fingers are trembling uncontrollably. "This is not a fight you can participate in," Benjamin shouts, scrambling up. He unleashes a rain of flying weapons to halt Celia's advance. Aphrodite leaps through the air, executing a double poison flower kick, but Celia parries the strike with effortless precision. Walter watches them, the ones favored by the gods, and feels a bitter ache. He prays to the goddesses of the spirit garden and mercy, but there is only silence. Then he thinks of Chesvia. She is no goddess, yet she saved him. She made the impossible possible. "Miss Chesvia asterisk," he whispers in his heart, asterisk, "please. Give me the right to stand in front of him." In the distance, the tide seems to turn. Finn's spear thrusts forward, forcing Celia back. Echoes of her own power surround her, slicing her arm. Blood splatters. For the first time, panic flickers across her face. She falls to one knee, gasping. Finn stands over her, spear at her throat. "It's over," he declares. But Celia looks up and smiles. "The end, what are you talking about?" The air turns cold. A pressure more suffocating than anything before explodes from her body. Her eyes turn a haunting bluish-green. This is the third phase, the advanced power of her blade. "To be executed," she whispers. The world falls silent. The crushing weight focuses entirely on Finn, pinning him to the earth. His knees buckle, his breath hitches. "Finn," Celia says softly, stepping forward for the kill. "You're a great fighter, you're very persistent, you're very—" She pauses, her voice dropping to a deadly chill, "annoying." Execution and being granted death, that is the full, terrifying name of Celia's nen blade. The moment she gripped its hilt, she knew, with a chilling certainty, that no mortal could ever surpass her. Celia raised her sword to strike. Though she stood several meters from Finn, a heavy, suffocating pressure filled the air. Everyone present felt it, the absolute, undeniable reality of Finn's impending death. Finn stared back at her. He did not kneel. His voice dripped with a toxic mix of mockery and malice as he spoke to the true Celia, buried deep wit. In her own heart, "Look," he whispered, "at how you killed your own comrades with your own hands." Finn was ready. He knew he couldn't defeat her alive, so he had prepared a final, hateful gift, a secondary development of his own nen blade. It was a mind blade that would only trigger upon his death, an indestructible echo of pure hatred that would haunt Celia for eternity. He felt a flicker of guilt for leaving Benjamin with such a mess, but he took a deep breath and looked up. "Bring it on." But Benjamin would not gamble with Finn's life. As Celia prepared the death sentence, Benjamin injected himself with the holy blood. In an instant, his mind exploded with godlike clarity. His consciousness expanded, invading the minds of everyone present, including Celia. Time seemed to freeze. Benjamin's spirit plunged into the darkness of Celia's inner world. He found himself in a gray-white void. There, the blue-haired goddess stood, inhumanly beautiful, with skin like a lifeless doll. Behind her, the real Celia was curled into a ball, hiding like a shamed child. "Hand over Celia's body," Benjamin demanded. The goddess smiled, she revealed her name and Ligay. "If you want it," she challenged, "come and get it." Their consciousnesses collided like two massive tidal waves. It was a war of pure will. Even with the holy blood, Benjamin was being pushed back by the goddess's overwhelming power. "Celia, wake up," Benjamin roared, desperate to reach her. But Ligay whispered poison into Celia's ear, reminding her of the gorillas she slaughtered and the blood on her hands. "What right do you have to live?" the goddess hissed. Celia trembled, sinking deeper into her despair. Benjamin fought to reach her, his voice growing hoarse, his spirit straining against the goddess's encroaching domain. But the power was too great. With a final, violent surge of divine will, Benjamin's consciousness was ejected back into the light. Benjamin suddenly opened his eyes, stumbling as his consciousness slammed back into his physical body. Aphrodite caught him, her voice trembling with worry. "What's wrong? You look terrible." Benjamin couldn't answer. He looked toward Celia, still possessed, still holding her sword high to deliver a death sentence. He had failed. Deep within the subconscious realm, Celia had remained curled in a ball, refusing to face the world. But it wasn't a total loss. The collision of their minds had disrupted the spell. Across the battlefield, the invisible blade of death fell toward Finn, but it struck only an echo. The real Finn materialized beside Benjamin, gasping for air. "What did you do?" "I tried to bring her back," Benjamin whispered, his voice heavy. "I failed her spirit. She's given up." Finn's gaze turned sharp as a knife. "Then forget about Celia. Do you want to watch this land be ravaged by destruction again? If you're too timid to fight, how do you expect to win?" Benjamin clenched his fist, his resolve hardening. "I know," he roared into the night sky. "I will defend against her. Go, attack." Finn's lips curled into a grim smile. "You've grown to the point where I actually have to look up to you." Finn, Aphrodite, and Percival charged. Celia met them with a cold, mocking laugh, her black and white spiritual flames swirling around her like a living barrier. She was stronger now, but so was Benjamin. The holy blood surging through his veins had elevated his mind blade to a godlike level. As Celia swung her sword to strike Finn, Benjamin raised a hand, fingers spread wide. An invisible force slammed into her blade, deflecting it by a mere half-inch, just enough for Finn to escape. Celia's eyes widened. "Mind power, since when could you?" Benjamin didn't let her finish. He clenched his fist. Suddenly, Celia was hoisted into the air by 1,000 invisible hands. She struggled, but the force was absolute. Benjamin tossed her like a rag doll, first toward Percival's lightning-wrapped blade, then into Aphrodite's rising thorns. Finally, Benjamin reached for the sky. High above, a colossal sphere of rock began to coalesce, obscuring the stars. A massive gravitational pull dragged everything upward, shards of stone, broken shields, and Celia herself. She was sucked into the center of the mass, and with a deafening boom, the rock sealed her inside a floating tomb. The soldiers of Frosttown stood frozen, staring at the moon-sized sphere hanging in the sky. "Where did you learn that move?" Aphrodite asked, breathless. Benjamin took a long, shaky breath. "From an old guy called the Six Paths Immortal. I watched him for hundreds of episodes." Aphrodite stared at the giant rock, then at Benjamin, and decided it was better not to ask. "Has she been trapped?" Percival's voice cuts through the air as he stares at the massive rock sphere. Benjamin hesitates, his tone uncertain. "For now, I cannot think of a way for her to get out." The words have barely left his lips when boom. The sphere shakes violently, cracks spiderweb across the surface, vomiting forth black and white flames. These are not hot, they are freezing. A thin layer of ice forms and shatters instantly wherever they touch. Benjamin's face pales. No way. The cold flames envelop the rock like an eerie, frozen sun. Then, another explosion. The sphere disintegrates into a hail of stone. Everyone scrambles for cover. Aphrodite is struck, Percival parries with his blade, and Finn raises a shield to protect Benjamin. As the dust clears, Celia stands in midair. Her clothes are tattered, her skin stained with blood, but her dark blue eyes burn with a terrifying rage. "It hurts so much," she whispers, her gaze locking onto Benjamin, "and I am very angry right now." She dives with impossible speed. "I'm going to spank you hard." Benjamin triggers his will, unleashing a repulsive force to blast her back, but she tears right through it with sheer brute scent. Rank, the crushing pressure of her death sentence descends, nearly forcing Benjamin to his knees. Finn thrusts his spear, Aphrodite's thorns erupt from the earth, Percival's lightning sword sweeps in, but someone else is faster. A massive, scaled dragon claw, ferocious and legendary, slams into Celia, sending her crashing through stone walls. Benjamin stares in shock at the owner of that power. It is Walter. His right hand has transformed into a monstrous limb. "This power came so suddenly," Walter says, looking at his claws, "but I am glad I have it now." Celia emerges from the ruins, her face contorted. "What is wrong with you all?" she screams, her voice laced with a hint of grievance. "How do you keep getting stronger? This script is wrong." Benjamin sees his opening. He hands Walter the final vial of holy blood. Walter injects it instantly, his power surging into a violent, ancient intensity. He transforms, not metaphorically but truly, into a dragon of flame. The battle turns. With Benjamin neutralizing Celia's asterisk death sentence, the team pushes her back. Walter unleashes a pillar of dragon fire, turning the ground to lava. Celia is forced to retreat, her confidence shattered. She realizes her primary goal is already complete. The womb of the Earth Mother has been recovered. There is no need to stay. Suddenly, a roar echoes from the clouds. Everyone looks up. In the dark night sky, a swarm of shadows approaches. The dead dragons of the temple are coming. Benjamin looked up, his eyes narrowing as an endless stream of the dead poured from the sky. Wyverns and unnamed monsters converged from every direction, a dark, suffocating mass that blotted out the very moon. "She's trying to run," he shouted. "Stop her." Before the words even left his lips, Benjamin acted. He raised his right hand toward the heavens, activating his Nen blade. The swooping wyverns froze midair, not by choice but yanked back by an invisible, crushing force. They thrashed desperately, but the air itself seemed to knead them together like clay. Bones shattered with the sound of 1,000 breaking branches, and black blood rained down as dozens of monsters were crushed into a single, pulpy sphere of flesh. The cost was immediate. A sharp pain lanced through Benjamin's skull. Warm blood began to leak from his nostrils, his eyes, and his ears. "Barren," Aphrodite cried out, her heart pounding. "Leave me alone," Benjamin's voice was a jagged rasp. "Take care of Celia first. If she escapes, there will be no end to this." Aphrodite surged forward. Already the battlefield was a chaotic symphony of steel and magic. Percival's lightning sword traced dazzling arcs across the night, while Finn flanked from the side, his spear a blur of silver. Walter, transformed into a massive lava dragon, slammed his claws down, forcing Celia to dodge the molten spray. Benjamin turned away from the heat of the chase, finding Knight Brynhua standing amidst the ruins. She looked at him with a complex gaze, recognizing, perhaps for the first time, that Benjamin was a leader worth following. "Knight Brynhua," Benjamin said firmly, "the garrison must act, fight the undead, maintain order." Brynhua nodded, turning to leave. She paused for a heartbeat, looking back over her shoulder. "Baron Blackwood, do not die. I have no intention of cleaning up the mess in the Southern Territory." As she vanished into the night, the soldiers of Frosttown rallied around Benjamin, their steam-powered crossbows thrumming as they brought down wyvern after wyvern. In the distance, the battle with Celia reached a fever pitch. Finn fought with a fearless, suicidal valor, his strikes echoing with the memories of every sword he had ever held. Aphrodite wove thickets of thorns to block her path, while Walter's dragonfire turned the earth to glass. "You living ants," Celia spat, dodging a lethal swipe from Walter. "I am fed up with you all. You are weak, you are broken. Why can't you just die peacefully?" Her contempt was absolute. She wasn't just an enemy, she was the very antithesis of life. With a shrill cry, Celia broke the encirclement. She leaped into the air, using a falling monster as a springboard to reach a passing wyvern. She grabbed its leg, pulling herself up, only to find she wasn't alone. A guerrilla fighter and a Deathbringer knight were already perched on the creature's back. Celia didn't hesitate, she lunged at the living soldier. Clang! The Deathbringer knight's blade intercepted hers. The flames in its eyes flared with a violent intensity. Celia froze in shock, but the wyvern gave a pained hiss. The weight of 3 passengers was too much. The wings faltered, and they began a long, uncontrolled plunge toward the earth below. Benjamin stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the darkening sky where the shadow had just vanished. His fists clenched and unclenched, a physical manifestation of the deep, biting regret gnawing at his chest. It was so close. Just a tiny bit more and they could have captured Celia. "Baron, I am sorry," Aphrodite whispered, his face heavy with guilt. "She got away." Benjamin watched the final black speck disappear into the clouds. Though resentment burned in his throat, he shook his head slowly. "Don't blame yourselves, you did your best. I simply did not expect the dead ones to appear in the sky." He turned back to the wreckage of the battlefield. "Let us clean up this mess first, then we discuss our next move." The recovery began. Percival started counting the casualties, while Walter, now back in his human form, sat pale and panting on a jagged rock. The soldiers of Frosttown stood guard, their crossbows clicking as they finished off the remaining undead. Everything seemed to be settling into a grim rhythm, until Finn's voice shattered the silence. Someone fell down. Finn was still staring at the horizon, at the exact point where Celia had vanished. Benjamin's heart leaped. Is it her? Is it Celia? He rushed to Finn's side, squinting against the glare. High above, a two-legged dragon was plummeting, its wings limp, its body tumbling through the air in a dead fall. On its back, Benjamin could just make out tiny, dark figures. Then boom! The dragon slammed into a nearby house. Tiles shattered like glass, wooden beams snapped, and the structure collapsed into a choking cloud of dust. As the debris settled, a guerrilla fighter crawled out of the ruins, touching his chest in disbelief. I'm not dead," he gasped, letting out a strange cry of relief. But the peace was short-lived. Celia burst from the rubble, looking utterly disheveled, her hair matted, her clothes tattered, and her face twisted in a mask of disbelief and fury. She wasn't looking at Benjamin. She was staring at the other figure crawling from the wreckage, a deathborn knight. "What exactly are you?" she hissed. Her voice trembled. The connection she used to manipulate the undead was gone, interfered with by something she couldn't understand. The knight straightened his back. He looked at Celia, the black and white flames in his eyes flickering violently. "See, Rhea," he croaked. The voice was hoarse, sounding like rusted metal grinding together. Celia frowned, raising her sword. "It is rude to call someone by their name so familiarly. I am not in the mood for conversation." "Waits," the knight began. "I am." Celia didn't wait. She lunged, her blade a streak of silver light. She had to end this and flee before Benjamin arrived. But the knight, despite his lack of fighting spirit, blocked her with terrifying, rock-steady precision. Desperate, Celia swung her blade toward the innocent guerrilla fighter. The knight didn't hesitate. He threw himself into the path of the strike to protect the man. The blow knocked his helmet flying and slashed a deep wound across his neck. Black liquid seeped out, slow and thick. Celia smiled, ready for the kill, until a flying sword whistled through the air, forcing her back. Benjamin had arrived. "Protect those two!" Benjamin shouted, as Percival and Aphrodite rushed to shield the survivors. Finn and Walter moved to engage Celia, forcing her into a desperate defense. Benjamin walked toward the armored stranger. The knight's gear was covered in eerie crystals, gleaming coldly in the moonlight. The style of the armor, it was hauntingly familiar. "You two," Benjamin began first. Suddenly, the Deathborn knight moved. He lunged forward, pinning Benjamin against a wall. "What are you doing?" Aphrodite roared, thorns sprouting from the ground. "Let him go." But Benjamin raised a hand, signaling for silence. He looked into those burning, flickering eyes. There was no murder there, no madness, only a complex, agonizing emotion. Benjamin's heart hammered against his ribs. He recognized that posture, that habit etched into the very bone. "Calvin," Benjamin's voice was dry, barely a whisper. The knight's body shuddered, the flames in his eyes flared with a sudden, violent intensity. Then he spoke, one broken syllable at a time. "Benjam." What was Benjamin feeling at that moment? Joy, sorrow, anger? These descriptions are too superficial to capture the storm within him. A mix of emotions overwhelmed him, making it impossible to speak. He was in a daze, until the figure before him pulled him back to reality. It was Calvin's face, but a face now covered in black crystals, with black and white flames burning in the eye sockets. It was the face of the deadborn. Benjamin could not bring himself to say, "You are still alive," because he knew this being was born of death, an existence neither living nor dead. To call him alive felt like a blasphemy. Yet, he was genuinely happy to see his friend again. For a heartbeat, he wanted to ignore the unsettling truth, but that faint joy was instantly crushed by a flood of melancholy, and then pure rage. "Nice to meet you," Benjamin whispered. Suddenly, a repulsive force erupted. Calvin was shoved away, rolling across the ground. Benjamin reached out and a sword flew from the ruins into his grip. He turned his glare toward Celia. He no longer cared if she was Celia or the entity known as Anrise. He was simply furious at what she had done to Calvin. How could she, he thought, how dare she? The blade of thought swelled with his rage. In an instant, Celia was seized by an invisible force as if squeezed by a giant hand and slammed against the wall. The stone shattered. Finn tried to move, but a wave of mental exhaustion washed over him. The power of the holy blood had ended. "Protect him," Finn gasped before plunging into darkness. Immediately, Benjamin's allies rushed to his side. Aphrodite summoned swirling thorns, Percival raised a lightning sword, and Walter, in his massive lava dragon form, blocked the path with his claws. Celia freed herself from the wall, dusting off her clothes with a look of confusion. "Calvin," she mused, "I do not know him, he was just a nobody." Then, she smiled. She loved Benjamin's out-of-control state. "Yes," she said brightly, "I did it, and what can you do? Would it make you feel better if I apologized?" She clasped her hands innocently. "Well, I am really sorry." There was no apology in her tone. Her voice turned light and airy. "But did you know, the one born from death isn't even the real person, and that Calvin you mentioned," her smile widened. "He is about to die. I will make sure he dies a horrible death right in front of you." Benjamin could not hold back. He unleashed a torrential downpour of mental energy and flying swords. Celia dodged, laughing, waiting for the moment his anger exposed a weakness. She broke through his defenses, closing the distance closer, closer. Then a figure slammed into her. It was Calvin. The dead-born knight pinned her to the ground with astonishing strength. His eyes, burning with black and white flames, stared into hers. "Shut up," his voice was hoarse but clear. "You are not allowed." Celia struggled as spiritual flames erupted from her body, spreading onto Calvin's arms. Benjamin screamed for him to let go, but Calvin did not move. Even as the fire consumed him, he held on. Celia's spiritual fire spreads through Calvin's body like a plague. These black and white flames are lethal to the living, but for a deathborn like Calvin, they are something far worse. They do not burn his flesh, they consume his soul. As the fire rages, Calvin feels his memories slipping away. He remembers his long, lonely journey from the capital to the southern border, a journey where his grip on his own mind grew weaker with every mile. He recalls the warning from the madman, Conrad, "Enjoy your last moments." What could a dying man do with his final hours? Calvin remembers coming across a family held captive by bandits. Without a second thought, he intervened. He was a terrifying sight, a knight encased in black crystals with ghost fire in his eyes, and when the bandits attacked, he cut them down with cold, efficient strokes. The family fled in terror, never offering a word of thanks. Yet, as Calvin watched them disappear, he felt a flicker of peace. He had done what was right. He had fought for the living, even after his own life had ended. Now, back in the ruins of Hurricane City, the spiritual fire finally begins to fade. Celia's willpower has been shattered by Benjamin's relentless mental assault. The street falls into a heavy silence. Calvin stands unsteadily, his body trembling. Benjamin reaches out to help, but Calvin pushes him away. He looks at Celia, now bound in chains, and feels a hollow sadness. She had chosen the side of the dead, making his own sacrifice feel almost absurd, but he shakes the thought away. "I am very clear about my fate," Calvin rasps. His voice is hoarse, broken, yet perfectly clear. "Since I am destined to leave, there is no need for regret." He reaches into a wooden box at his waist and pulls out the crown of the rising wind. He presses the cold metal against Benjamin's chest. "This is yours," he whispers. "What you do with it is none of my business." Calvin retreats to a corner of a broken wall and slowly sits down. He watches the deepest darkness just before the dawn, searching for the right words to say goodbye. He wants something meaningful, something that will linger. As the first rays of sunlight touch the horizon, Calvin looks up at Benjamin one last time. "May you be wise, young king." The flames in his eyes flicker and go out. Benjamin stands in the morning light staring at the silent figure leaning against the ruins. A great, wordless sorrow wells up within him as the sun rises over the dead. Benjamin stood with his back to the world, facing the morning sun. In his hand, the cool, heavy weight of the crown felt. Substantial, a physical reminder that the long night was finally over. Behind him, Aphrodite knelt as Calvin clasped his hands, whispering a silent prayer of farewell, a final goodbye to a duke worth remembering. With the tyrant gone, Hurricane City began to breathe again. Under Benjamin's direction, the soldiers of Frosttown secured the walls, while Commander Brinwa's garrison held back the endless tide of Deadborn. The city could be defended, but the mess left behind was vast. When Brinwa approached him, Benjamin was already calculating his next move. She didn't beat around the bush. "What now?" she asked. "Will you let the lords fight until they are exhausted or take control?" Benjamin looked her in the eye, his voice steady. "I will not make the irresponsible choice. The common people always pay the price for noble power struggles. I will declare that the Southern Territory has joined the United Commune. The other lords have two choices: submit or secede." Brinwa was silent, struck by his directness. Benjamin pressed further, asking where the three valiant knightly orders stood now that their leader was dead. Brinwa paused, then slowly knelt, her posture upright and standard. "We will maintain order until you quell the unrest," she promised. "But you must demonstrate your own courage to truly win the knights' loyalty." With the alliance settled, Benjamin moved to the remote, heavily guarded room where Celia was being held. There he found Finn, standing motionless at the door. "I gave you the key," Benjamin said softly. "Why haven't you gone in?" Finn's voice was hoarse, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. "I don't want to see her. That thing occupies her body. When the real Celia appears, she is broken, unstable." He slammed a fist into the wall, cracks spidering through the stone. "People tell me it wasn't her fault, that she was possessed. But my hatred is real, Benjamin. It keeps me awake at night." He looked at Benjamin with eyes full of agony. "If I kill her, I have my revenge, but I lose your friendship. I've already lost her. I can't lose you too." Finn turned away, his decision made. "I'm going back to the Riverlands. The people there need me. Just promise me you'll change this place, make it just." "I promise," Benjamin replied. Finn walked away, leaving Benjamin alone at the door. He knew it might be years before he saw his friend again. Benjamin turned the key and entered the metal, windowless cell. Celia sat in the corner, bound by heavy shackles, her pale red eyes staring blankly into the void. She was like a lost child, whispering names to the empty air. Benjamin didn't speak again. He simply sat down on the cold floor beside her, and together they stared at the blank wall. Benjamin never imagined he would be alone with Celia like this. Their identities had completely reversed. The former serf was now a man of power, and the princess was his prisoner. He looked at her, feeling more melancholy than joy. He remembered how she had once pulled him from the dirt to witness legends of elves and dwarves. Now her spirit seemed shattered, perhaps by the dark influence of Enligi, or perhaps she was simply hiding from a reality too painful to face. Benjamin sighed, but then a trembling, clenched hand extended toward him. It was Celia. "This," she whispered, her voice so faint it could be carried away by the wind. "For you, don't want, I hate, me." In her palm lay two round discs of wood. They were rough, sanded by hand from a bed board or a chair. Benjamin took them. They were weightless. Yet his heart felt heavy as lead. He looked at her blank, empty eyes, feeling a profound sense of helplessness. Later, Benjamin stood before the coffin of Calvin. The fine wood glowed dimly in the candlelight. Inside, the warrior lay in polished armor, his sword at his side. A single, withered rose sat atop the lid. Aphrodite stood nearby and shrugged. "Flowers are hard to find this time of year," he said. "I had to make do." Benjamin smiled sadly. He won't mind. He actually loved flowers, though he'd never admit it. When they were certain they were alone, Benjamin pulled a jet-black object from his pocket, the crown of the wind. Aphrodite's eyes lit up with mischief. "Why don't you try it on?" he urged. "Maybe something amazing will happen. Don't let the old man down. He called you the young king, didn't he?" Benjamin hesitated, then placed the crown upon his head. He closed his eyes, striking a regal pose. "I feel," he began slowly, "I feel supreme, as if the world is beneath my feet." Aphrodite held his breath. "Anything else?" Benjamin's composure crumbled. "No," he admitted. "Actually, it just fits perfectly, like it was tailor-made." Aphrodite looked disappointed. No ancient power, no blinding light. In the puppet shows, the hero always awakens a hidden aura. Benjamin removed the crown and tucked it away. That only happens in stories, Aphrodite. In reality, it is just a beautiful decoration. After Benjamin departed for the south, a silent storm began to brew in the Eastern Territory, specifically at the ancient Skinning Chapel. This desolate building, nestled among bare rocks and dead trees, was suddenly surrounded by the elite military force of the Pale Church, the Holy Army. Hundreds of soldiers in identical silver armor stood with cold expressions, their goal clear: to seize the skin of the goddess of magic buried beneath the stone floors. But a single obstacle stood in their way. Pope Saliham, an old man from the Church of Lingyuan, had rushed inside alone. He stood at the doors, declaring that removing the relic would bring only disaster. Sylvie, the man known as the executioner, watched from the front of the ranks with his arms crossed. To him, the Pope was nothing more than a clown. He burned with the desire to bury the old man on the spot, but he was bound by his master's orders to wait. Days turned into weeks. As the kingdom fell into chaos and the undead began to roam, the order finally came: take the remains at all costs. What happened next remains a mystery. No one saw the struggle, but when Sylvie was finally carried out of the chapel, he was a charred, blackened corpse. His armor had melted into his flesh, his hair was gone, and the smell of burnt skin filled the air, yet miraculously he recovered within days. His skin returned to its original color, but his arrogance was gone. He never spoke of the chapel again. Soon, a new mission arrived. Livia, the Lord of Holy Spring Territory, had officially betrayed the church. With a sharp, dangerous smile, Sylvie turned his army away from the chapel. "Let that old bastard stay there," he sneered. "We have a traitor to deal with." As the Holy Army marched, the Wangling United Commune prepared for war. Under the direction of Baron Guise, a massive defensive line was established outside Holy Spring. Steel-armored vehicles, monsters of iron that moved without horses, were positioned along the tracks. Soldiers and supplies poured in by rail from Blackrock and Ironforge day and night. Inside the city, Livia was terrified. Following Benjamin's parting instructions, she had issued a bold statement, condemning the Eastern Church as a heretical sect. The backlash was immediate. Letters arrived like a blizzard, filled with vile insults and death threats that nearly shattered her faith. Dizzy with fear, Livia hid the letters away, clinging to only one thought: the last words Benjamin said before he left: "Hold the Holy Spring Territory until I return." The voice was insistent, cutting through the silence of the corridor. "Sister Livia wishes to see you." Rinaldo did not stop his work. "My walls aren't finished yet," he replied flatly. "Don't bother me." A rough, mocking sneer erupted from behind him, a voice that sounded as if it were being blasted directly from a man's chest. "Come on now." Rinaldo finally turned. Standing at the entrance was a burly man with crossed arms and a look of pure impatience. It was Baron Gus of Blackrock Territory, a veteran military leader and a pillar of the United Commune. "My men reported it," Gus growled, his eyes narrowing. "You've painted that wall at least 4 times already. As an excuse, it's absolutely rotten." Rinaldo set down his brush with a heavy sigh of helplessness. "Nominally speaking, I am still a prisoner." "Just ask me whatever you want," Rinaldo continued, glancing toward Livia, who breathed a visible sigh of relief. She stepped forward, carefully choosing her words. "How much do you know about Sylvie?" she asked, "the commander of this Crusader expedition, the one the leader trusts most." Rinaldo's brow twitched at the name. "An executioner who treats everyone equally," he said darkly, "a demon who worships a goddess." Livia pressed him, hoping to separate fact from rumor, but Rinaldo leaned against the railing, his gaze deepening with a chilling intensity. "The rumors, take them all seriously, every single one. He is a man with no taboos, a man who takes pleasure in executing heretics. Do not even dream of peace talks. He likely planned the massacre of the Holy Spring Territory before he even set foot on the road." Livia's face turned pale. How could the master allow such a person to hold power? Rinaldo's expression became uncomfortably blunt. "If we don't appoint someone who dares to do anything, are we going to appoint someone like you who would betray us?" Livia flushed a deep red, stammering about protecting companions, but Gus stepped in, shaking his head. He wanted facts, not philosophy. What about his tactics? Gus demanded. Direct, violent, no turning back, Reinaldo warned. He is no easy opponent, do not underestimate him. Meanwhile, miles away, the earth shook under the weight of 30,000 soldiers. Sylvie rode at the head of the Great Crusade, watching the flags blot out the sky. A satisfied, predatory smile curved his lips as the Iron Rock territory appeared on the horizon. I hope the Count has prepared fine wine and beautiful women, Sylvie mused to his adjutant. Otherwise, I might have to go and give him a talking to. The massive army marched on, a relentless tide of steel, moving toward a confrontation that promised no mercy. Earl Ironrock is a man drowning in trouble. Ever since the anomaly struck the capital, his prestige as a prominent noble of the East has been crumbling. First, the grain supplies vanished. Then, the trade routes were severed by the dead ones, shambling corpses that seem to multiply daily, as if the commoners are choosing death simply to escape the hunger. When advisors suggested opening the royal granaries to feed the starving, the Earl laughed. To him, the idea was absurd. No nobleman would sacrifice his own stores for the peasantry, yet a deeper fear gnaws at him. While he can suppress a civilian riot, a rebellion of starving soldiers is a death sentence. Adding to his fury is the news from the royal domain. Despite the unnatural ice, they are somehow producing food and selling it at extortionate prices. Even his own son, a rebellious adventurer in Stone Cliff territory, refused to help, telling his father to simply buy what he needs. But now an opportunity has arrived. The Pale Church has declared war on the rebellious Holy Spring territory. Eager for a share of the spoils and the secrets of the king's new inventions, the Earl has mustered 20,000 troops and prepared a lavish banquet for the church's messengers. As the church's elite army marches through his lands, the Earl is struck by their wealth. Their armor outshines his finest steel. Soon, he whispers to himself, that profit will be mine. His eldest son Gallio leads the commander into the hall. The man is Sylvie, a towering, muscular prize. Who swaggered in with total disregard for etiquette. Before the Earl could even offer a greeting, Sylvie barked his first demand, "Are the women and the wine ready?" The Earl froze. This was the commander of tens of thousands. He tried to maintain his dignity, inviting the man to sit, but Sylvie was blunt. He demanded to know exactly how much the Earl would pay the church and what he expected in return. Insulted, the Earl unleashed his mind blade, a divine aura of crushing pressure that sent servants collapsing to the floor. But Sylvie didn't even flinch. He simply cracked open a wine bottle, drained it, and mocked the Earl's power as petty. Realizing he was outmatched, the Earl signaled Gallio to fetch the wine and the women. As Gallio hurried away, Sylvie shouted a final, crude taunt after him, leaving the Earl to realize that this alliance would be far more dangerous than he ever imagined. Gallio Ironrock felt as though he were living through the worst day of his entire life. As the eldest son of Earl Ironrock, he had spent years crafting a mask of absolute perfection, the obedient son, the respectable heir, the untouchable brother. Every step was measured, every word was tactful. But today that mask was slipping. Gallio hurried down the castle's long stone corridor, his leather boots clattering like frantic heartbeats against the floor. He wasn't being chased by a ghost, no, it was something far more unsettling. He was haunted by a single instruction from the executioner, Sylvie, go find the most beautiful woman in the castle. That request was simple enough for a man of his status, but it was Sylvie's final, mocking addition that sent chills down his spine. If there are no women, men will do, you're quite good. What did that mean? What had he done well? Desperate to finish this task and hide until the army departed, Gallio barked orders at his two panting attendants. "My lord, where are you going?" one asked, breathless. "To find someone," Gallio snapped. "A woman, a beautiful woman." The servants exchanged a subtle, knowing glance. "Sir, at this hour you're looking for a woman." Gallio spun around, glaring. "It is not for me, it is for the guest in the church." The servants' expressions shifted from confusion to something even more scandalous. Meanwhile, far to the north, Hill sat in her study, buried under a mountain of intelligence reports. The world was changing too fast. Seeds, steam engines, self-moving chariots. The words were familiar, but the reality felt like a future she couldn't grasp. And then there was Benjamin. The reports were unbelievable. Benjamin had conquered Holy Spring territory, Benjamin was marching south with unstoppable momentum. She stared at the ceiling, a bitter spark of jealousy igniting in her chest. While she was busy playing nice with petty northern nobles, Benjamin had become the mastermind of the kingdom's chessboard. She looked at the latest letter from her infor. Mount Evelyn, it was useless. Everything is normal, it read. The Baron is very good. Hill sighed, tossing the paper aside. Benjamin had clearly bribed her spy. The time for observation was over. Hill walked to the window, watching the gray northern snow melt against the glass. She had a choice to make. Should she bet on Benjamin, her old friend, the underdog with a weak foundation, or should she side with the eldest prince, Alkea? Alkea had the territory, the military, and the power to protect her interests, even if it meant facing the disappointed eyes of her old allies. Her gaze deepened as she remembered Benjamin's secret, the ancient ruins buried beneath the city of Mingzhu. Rumor had it that strange phenomena were occurring within those depths. The stakes were rising, the chips were on the table, and Hill was finally ready to play her hand. The northern frontier, Pearl City. Hill stood before a newly constructed building, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. This structure had been built overnight, a massive expense she no longer wished to calculate, all because Benjamin sent word that something might be hidden in these ruins. She turned to her adjutant. The man's face was pale. "Sir," he whispered, "the first group, they haven't come out." Hill nodded slowly. "And the second," the adjutant swallowed hard, "they didn't come out either." Hill took a deep breath. This resurrection facility was rumored to be connected to the gods. She held no true respect for deities. In fact, she wished she could command them, but she wasn't a fool. Entering recklessly was suicide. Suddenly, a subordinate shouted, "Sir, someone is coming out." Hill hurried to the entrance. Several men from the second group were staggering into the light. Their clothes were tattered, their eyes unfocused. "You are still alive?" Hill asked. One man stepped forward, his voice a hoarse rattle. "Sir, inside, there is." He stopped, his eyes began to bulge, stretching until, bang. His eyes literally exploded. Blood and clear fluid splattered the stone. Then the horror truly began. Tiny, wriggling worms popped from the empty sockets, hovering for a heartbeat before lunging at the nearest guards. Screams erupted. Men clawed at their faces as the parasites burrowed deep into their skulls. Hill reacted instantly, activating her intangible Nen blade. The insects passed through her like smoke, but everyone else was infested within seconds. They stood there, shivering and bewildered. Hill looked at them coldly. "Gentlemen," she said, "please enjoy your holiday here." She stepped back. Click, the door was locked. As pounding echoed from within, Hill turned to her remaining troops. "Seal this place," she commanded. "Not a single fly gets out." Meanwhile, at the southern border, Benjamin was busy with a different kind of problem. He stood before the temple of the Earth Mother, shouting orders. 2 more boxes on the left, T. 3 on the right. Dozens of boxes of dust crystal explosives were being rigged to the ancient stone. Manhwa, his companion, looked on with concern. "Isn't this wasteful?" she asked. Benjamin pointed at the gloomy entrance. "To shut this nest of undead up forever, it's a bargain." He raised his hand. Boom. A pillar of fire punched into the sky. The temple collapsed into a heap of shattered stone and dust. When the smoke cleared, only a crater remained. Manhwa stared, dazed. "I never imagined it could be destroyed so easily," she murmured. She knelt before him, her gaze resolute. "Please, give the order. What are we to conquer next?" Benjamin pulled her up. "No need to rush," he said, looking at the settling dust. "We still have a lot of trouble ahead of us." Benjamin was in the middle of providing friendly instruction to the uncooperative nobles of the Southern Territory when the news arrived. The Pale Church of the East had sent troops to attack Holy Spring Territory. His teaching method was unique. Step 1. Take the newly surrendered knights on a grand, ostentatious tour of the local lands, making sure every neighbor noticed. Step 2. Have the soldiers of Frosttown fire a few explosive crossbow bolts at the local lord's castle. These bolts, a joint project of Frosttown and Ironforge, possessed immense power and guaranteed quality. Step 3. A simple trip to a local restaurant for tea. This philosophy yielded remarkable results. Even the most unruly nobles became obedient students, with one notable exception, the Earl of Conan. The Earl was a man of pride. He had watched his rival, Upton, boast of power, only for Upton to die suddenly. When Benjamin announced that the United Commune was taking over, the Earl was furious. he gathered his troops, certain that a show of force would make the outsider back down. But then the reports started coming in. "My lord," a scout cried, "the valiant knights are circling our territory, it's a threat." Before the earl could curse, another scout rushed in, breathless. "My lord, the castle walls, they've been blasted, blown to pieces." The earl's ambition vanished. He began plotting how to betray his allies just to survive. But one morning, a servant approached him, trembling. "Sir, your children, they are in the restaurant, drinking tea with strangers." The earl rushed to the scene. There, at the table, his children were laughing with a dignified man, Benjamin himself. His wife was politely serving tea. Beside them sat a long-haired man named Aphrodite, happily devouring snacks. The earl's legs went weak. He didn't shout, he simply sat down, defeated. His son cheered, "Father, big brother Benjamin is amazing." His daughter wept, begging Benjamin not to leave. Even his private collection of rare wine was being drained by Aphrodite. As Benjamin finally made his exit, the earl stood in the silence of his own home. He realized then it wasn't just his land or high wine he had lost the very hearts of his family. Outside, a drunken Aphrodite hiccuped, asking, "How many more nobles do we have to visit?" Benjamin smiled, "Only 5 or 6 left. Baron Frosttown will return like lightning." This phrase has ignited the streets of Wangling, spreading from high-society tea-houses to the gritty alleys where children chant his name. In his study, the civil official Laurent pores over the latest promotional manuscripts with a mix of awe and disbelief. The propaganda is absurd, yet brilliant. The Baron is a lightning bolt sent by heaven to cleave this corrupt era. It is the work of Erwin Hawthorne, a man whose genius for publicity makes even the seasoned Laurent feel like an amateur. Erwin, ever the opportunist, has abandoned his post in Silverbrook to chase the profit and prestige of Benjamin's return. He even snatched the honor of welcoming the Baron away from his own daughter, Lena, leading to a fiery domestic spat. Now, at Golden Ear Valley, the two rivals, Laurent and Erwin, have formed an uneasy alliance. Upon hearing that Benjamin didn't just return but killed the tyrant Upton and annexed the southern territory, they realize a simple party won't suffice. They decide to transform his homecoming into a permanent national holiday, an unprecedented, wildly expensive spectacle. As Benjamin's entourage approaches the city, everything appears normal until they cross the gates. Suddenly, the sky explodes. Ribbons rain down and flower petals blanket the earth. Thinking it's an ambush, the Knight Walter tackles Benjamin to the ground, shouting, "Enemy attack!" But as the dust settles, upbeat music fills the air. It isn't a battle, it's a carnival. Magic crystals worth a fortune are being detonated in the sky like primitive fireworks. Benjamin brushes himself off, watching his companion Aphrodite immediately dive into the festivities. He finds Laurent and Erwin standing atop a raised platform, looking like the masterminds of a grand circus. When Benjamin dryly critiques their lack of modesty, Laurent remains firm. "This is a necessary expense to show the kingdom our power." The atmosphere is electric, yet a shadow lingers. When Laurent asks after Princess Celia, Benjamin's smile falters. "She's here," he says quietly, "but things are complicated." For now, the complexity is drowned out by the roar of the crowd. Under a sky filled with shimmering crystal dust, the celebration of the Lightning Baron begins in earnest. The celebration is a sea of unrestrained joy. On an elevated platform, musicians play cheerful tunes while the crowd dances in the flickering firelight. But in the center of it all, one figure stands out. Aphrodite. He leaps and shouts, his voice drowning out the music as he performs his self-proclaimed Linguan dance steps. The crowd retreats not out of admiration but out of fear. His arms sweep horizontally like blades, his legs kick wildly. With his eyes squeezed shut, he is a whirlwind of uncoordinated vitality. At the edge of the square, Percival watches unsettled. In the pale church, festivals were solemn, dignified affairs. This is chaos, yet he feels a strange warmth in his chest. A young woman nearby points at the dancer, her eyes sparkling. "That person is so interesting," she cries. "Look how happy he is." Percival stares at the stumbling, off-key mess that is Aphrodite. "He's drunk," Percival says flatly. "He is about to go on a rampage. We should stay away." The girl only beams brighter. "He must have such an interesting soul." Percival falls silent, deciding it is best to say no more. High above the square atop a mansion terrace, Walter watches the festivities in silence. He prefers the solitude. He is the only one the Baron kept behind while the others were dismissed to join the party. To Walter, this is a mark of ultimate trust. Footsteps echo behind him. It is Benjamin. "Sorry to leave you here," the Baron says softly. "Come with me." They retreat into Lauren's office, where the air is thick with the scent of ink and old paper. Lauren and Erwin are hunched over a table covered in maps, the celebration forgotten. "Minister Walter," Lauren greets him, "we need an expert's advice." The atmosphere shifts instantly to the cold reality of war. The objective? To crush the holy crusade of the Pale Church. Walter reviews the reports, his eyes narrowing as he studies the enemy commander, Sylvie, a ruthless tactician who uses believers as human shields. Benjamin points to the map, his voice low and steady. "We have troops in Golden Harvest Valley. We need a plan to strike the enemy's rear." Walter traces a line across the parchment. The weight of the command settles on his shoulders. He is no longer just a soldier, he is the Minister of Military Affairs. "I will share my thoughts," Walter says, his voice firm. "Please point out any inaccuracies." Inside the departing carriage, Aphrodite leans against the wooden wall and lets out a long, weary yawn. He sighs, his tone carrying a hint of lingering reluctance. "Leaving so soon? I thought I could stay in Golden Ear Valley for a few more days." Benjamin's gaze falls on his companion's face. Aphrodite's dark circles look as if he's been punched twice. "Speed is of the essence in war," Benjamin remarks dryly, "but did you dance all night yesterday?" Aphrodite touches his eyes and chuckles. "The girls in the valley are just too enthusiastic. One after another they asked me to dance, and I was too embarrassed to refuse." He adopts a serious, dramatic expression. "Unfortunately, I am an untouchable rose. To touch my heart, one must pass through layers of thorns." Benjamin frowns. "Where did you learn these words? They sound rather pretentious." As the scenery rushes by, the conversation turns to the war. Aphrodite asks why he wasn't included in the planning. Benjamin sighs, reminding him that in the past, Aphrodite simply played dead whenever asked for an opinion. "Fine, fine," Aphrodite waves a hand, but his expression turns somber. "But is it all right to let Percival go with Walter?" He reminds Benjamin that Percival is, after all, a knight of the Pale Church appointed by the Lord himself. Currently, Benjamin and Aphrodite are traveling alone back to Holy Spring territory. Meanwhile, Walter and Percival have taken their troops to circle around the enemy's rear. Their goal? To cut off the supply lines of the Pale Crusades. It is a simple tactic, but a dangerous one. Benjamin is acting as a grand, noisy distraction with the Frosttown forces, while Walter strikes from the shadows. "Are you worried he'll defect?" Benjamin asks. Aphrodite nods. He explains that faith is not something changed in a day. Percival has spent years reciting prayers to the Pale Goddess. "What will he do," Aphrodite muses, "when it comes to taking action against his own church?" Benjamin reveals that it was actually Walter's idea to take Percival along. Walter wanted to test the knight's true intentions, to see where his loyalty lies once and for all. So, Aphrodite concludes, "Rather than saying you trust Percival, I would say I trust Walter," Benjamin interjects. Aphrodite laments the complexity of human relationships, closes his eyes, and falls asleep. Back at the territory, the news of Benjamin's return reaches Livia. Her legs go weak and she sinks into her chair. He is back, and that means he has succeeded. He has brought the Princess Celia back with him. Livia is overwhelmed, a mix of relief, nerves, and a feeling she cannot quite describe. News of Baron Frosttown's return has spread through the royal territory like a wildfire, outrunning even the fastest messenger. Before Benjamin could reach the Holy Spring, the word had already reached Sylvie, and from Sylvie it reached her lieutenant. The adjutant received his orders and a lethal plan was set in motion. Benjamin leans against his carriage, watching the landscape blur past. "We are almost at the combat zone," he remarks quietly. Aphrodite wakes from a nap, rubbing his eyes. "War zone." "Yes," Benjamin replies, "the Pale Church's crusaders and our own defenses have swallowed the land. It is much larger than I imagined." Outside, the countryside is no longer peaceful. Columns of black smoke rise against the horizon and the faint, rhythmic thud of destruction echoes in the air. Suddenly, Benjamin's brow furrows. His perception catches something moving at high speed. Aphrodite. He cannot finish the warning. Boom. A massive iron ball slams into the roof, crushing the carriage like a discarded toy. Wood splinters, metal shrieks and twists. Benjamin is thrown into the dirt, rolling several times before skidding to a halt. He looks up to see a burly man on a nearby hill holding the heavy iron chains attached to the projectile. An assassination attempt, Benjami. Anne is surprised they found his route so easily. Barren, Aphrodite calls out. He stands amidst a thicket of thorns that have sprouted from the earth to catch the iron ball midair. Are you all right? Fine, Benjamin says, dusting himself off. His mind blade extends, scanning the terrain. 3 chosen ones, 20 armored knights, all lying in ambush. Enemy attack, the Frosttown soldiers shout. They do not panic. They move with lethal precision, stripping the covers off their hidden cargo, portable steam crossbows. Aim at that hill, Benjamin commands. Fire. The crossbows roar, 2 bolts scream through the air, detonating upon impact. 4 knights are instantly reduced to scrap metal and minced meat. Realizing their cover is blown, the adjutant orders a full charge. 15 knights thunder toward the convoy. But the Frosttown soldiers are ready. They unleash a new terror from the military factories, high-concentration ethanol vapor. Laugh, the white gas sprays out, followed by a spark. Boom. Streaks of fire engulf the knights. The horses scream, bolting in a frenzy as the riders are consumed by flames that water cannot extinguish. The burly man charges down the hill, swinging his iron ball, but suddenly, the chains turn against him. They wrap around his limbs, tightening like vipers. Aphrodite leaps into the air, delivering a devastating kick, the double-thorned poison flower straight into the man's face. Teeth fly, bone shatters. In the distance, the adjutant watches the chaos with a cold, calculated silence. This was merely a test. Sylvie's orders were clear: kill Benjamin Blackwood, no matter the cost. Aphrodite, spare his life. Benjamin's voice cuts through the chaos as he raises his longbow, aiming at a blur of motion. The enemy knight is galloping across the battlefield at an impossible speed, a shimmering streak that the soldiers' blades can barely touch. Benjamin releases the string, the arrow pierces the air. The knight, calculating the distance with a smirk, twists his body to let the projectile graze his ear, but before his smile can form, he freezes. The arrow suddenly changes direction in midair. Controlled by Benjamin's mental blade, the shaft whips around and strikes from behind. Arrows pierce the knight's shoulder and thigh. He screams, tumbling into the dirt. Instantly, the soldiers of Frosttown swarm him, pressing cold spear tips against his throat. Nearby, the second battle has ended. Aphrodite stands over a burly man who is bound tightly in magical thorns, tied up like a rice dumpling. Don't move, Aphrodite says with a playful smile. The more you struggle, the more it hurts. Benjamin surveys the field, his brow furrows. One of the chosen ones, the one who stood still throughout the fight, has vanished. He escaped with such decisive speed that even Benjamin's mental radar couldn't catch him. If they ran, Aphrodite shrugs. The column moves on, now carrying TW. Silent prisoners crammed into a single carriage. Aphrodite sits inside, staring at them with unblinking intensity. He tries to taunt them, but the knight and the burly man remain deathly still, one staring at the roof, the other at the floor. Hours pass, the only sound is the rhythmic rolling of wheels. When they finally reach the Holy Spring territory, Benjamin pulls back the carriage curtain. He finds Aphrodite in a bizarre trance, back straight, eyes wide like saucers, locked in a silent staring contest with the captives. "What are you doing?" Benjamin asks. Instilling a sense of oppression, Aphrodite whispers, his neck stiff. Benjamin sighs, patting his friend's shoulder. "Forget it, your eyes are bloodshot, let the professionals handle them." They enter Holy Spring City, but it is no longer the sacred sanctuary Benjamin remembers. The white stone walls are now bristling with crossbows. The peaceful monks have been replaced by grim, armored patrols. It is no longer a city of faith, it is a fortress. Livia is waiting at the gate. As they walk side by side, Benjamin notices her exhaustion. "You've done a great job, Livia," he says softly. "I know how much you hate pressure." Tears well in her eyes, the praise breaks her stoic facade. I'm fine," she stammers, her voice trembling with newfound pride. "I can process dozens of documents now, I'm capable." As they walk toward the cathedral, Livia realizes, in her excitement, she has completely forgotten to ask where Celia is. Benjamin stood by the window, his voice low as he recounted the harrowing journey through the south. Livia sat on a nearby bench, her fingers tightly clutching the hem of her dress as she listened. When Benjamin spoke of the encounter with Celia in Hurricane City and the dark changes within her, Livia's face paled. Her heart clenched at the description of the merciless battle between Finn and Celia, and when the story reached the moment of Calvin's death, she instinctively began to pray. She clasped her hands, her lips moving in a silent, desperate plea. Benjamin did not interfere, he simply waited in the stillness until she finished. Finally, Livia opened her eyes. "I am a foolish woman," she whispered. "I grieve for them all, for Calvin, for Finn, and even for Celia. I wish everyone could have a second chance, just as I did." Benjamin saw the unutterable sorrow in her eyes, a grief only shared by those who had survived the fire together. He looked away, out toward the horizon, until Livia gently took his hand. "Things aren't that bad yet," she encouraged him. "You still have me, and Ella, and perhaps even Lauren." Benjamin couldn't help but smile at her hesitation. "Lauren would be upset to hear that," he teased, "considering he paid for all the trouble we caused." He then suggested that Livia visit Celia to aid her recovery. Livia agreed, but before leaving, she led Benjamin down the corridor to her private office. "There is someone you should see first," she said. "Without her, I couldn't keep up with the paperwork." She pushed the door open to reveal a mountain of documents. Buried beneath them was a haggard, exhausted figure with dark circles under her eyes. "Evelyn," Benjamin gasped. The woman looked up, looking utterly wilted. "It has been a long time, Your Excellency," she croaked. This was not the original Evelyn, but a clone Evelyn No. 5 created by her mind blade ability. She was currently stuffing a cold pancake into her mouth with her bare hands. Suddenly she broke down. "I regret it," she wailed. "I thought more bodies meant more enjoyment, but it just means twice the workload. I have only one consciousness. The work never ends." Amused but sympathetic, Benjamin urged Livia to take over the desk and let the poor secretary rest, but his peace was short-lived. A soldier rushed in, gasping for breath. "My lord, Bishop Aphrodite and the priests are fighting in the cathedral." Benjamin hurried to the scene to find a chaotic standoff. Aphrodite stood defiantly over Calvin's coffin, arms outstretched like a mother hen. "Get out of my way," Aphrodite roared at the white-robed priests. "The authority to comfort the dead belongs to the Church of the Sacred Hearts. We are the professionals here. Your prayers are dry and lifeless." The priest sputtered in rage, but Aphrodite stood his ground, refusing to yield the funeral rites of his fallen comrade to anyone else. The adjutant considered himself a lucky man, not the common luck of finding a coin in the dirt, but a deeper, more primal destiny. He worshipped the goddess of celebration, the mistress of feasts, wine, and the hunt. To him, assassination was the ultimate pleasure. The sight of prey struggling in despair, the moment blood splatters, the instant life slips away. Once a condemned pagan, he was saved from the Pale Church's executioners by Sylvie. Sylvie, the man known as the executioner, had released him and his fellow heretics, giving them a second life. Under Sylvie's protection, they were free to do evil, seek revenge, or simply exist. In return, the adjutant offered a loyalty born from the heart. So when Sylvie commanded, "Kill Benjamin Blackwood," the adjutant accepted without hesitation. He was tired of the legends surrounding the son of a serf-turned-regional overlord. It was time to bring those stories to a close. The adjutant's secret weapon was a blade called mimicry. It allowed him to transform into anyone he had ever seen, perfectly replicating their voice, movements, and even their scent. He approached the city gates of Holy Spring, bypassing the long queues of merchants and believers. In a quiet corner, he found his first target, an ordinary businessman. With a swift, silent strike, the merchant's world went dark. The adjutant dragged the body beneath a wagon and began the transformation. Bones shifted, skin remodeled, hair grew. Within seconds, an identical middle-aged man swaggered past the guards and into the city. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Soldiers patrolled every street. The adjutant abandoned his carriage in a secluded alley and shifted again, this time taking the form of a patrolling soldier. He blended seamlessly into the ranks, marching straight into the cathedral where Blackwood was said to reside. Inside the halls, he spotted the lazy, humming figure of Bishop Aphrodite. Ducking into the shadows, the adjutant mimicked the bishop's relaxed gait and carefree tone, even fooling a passing priest. but he needed someone closer to the inner circle. He soon identified a young nun named Daisy, a member of Lady Livia's entourage. After luring the real Daisy into an empty room, he emerged wearing her face. "Sister Daisy," a voice called out, "Lady Livia is looking for you." He followed the summons into the office where Livia sat buried under a mountain of documents. She looked up with a weary, grateful smile. "Daisy, you're always so reliable." The adjutant smiled back, his hands moving efficiently through the papers. He watched her every movement, memorizing her habits. If he could take Livia's identity to reach Benjamin Blackwood, the kill would be effortless. "Of course," he whispered, already imagining the moment the hunt would end. The adjutant stepped through the quiet corridor and into the main hall of the cathedral. His current identity was Livia, and the disguise was flawless. The nun's robe, the gentle expression, everything was perfect. He silently rehearsed her mannerisms, a dignified posture, gentle eyes, and a voice that was just slightly timid. But as he walked, he felt himself losing control. Perhaps it was because he hadn't played a woman in so long, or perhaps it was because Livia's face was naturally suited to special expressions. Passing a mirror, he subconsciously smiled. It wasn't Livia's smile. It was alluring, provocative, and carried a touch of smugness that said, "I know I'm beautiful." He nodded in satisfaction and continued. Along the way, clergy and monks bowed in greeting. "Good day, Sister Livia," they said. "You look radiant today." The adjutant responded to each one with a seductive, secret-filled smile. A young monk froze in his tracks, murmuring, "When did she become so beautiful?" An older monk agreed, and they exchanged a silent, knowing glance. Even a janitor stopped his work, scratching his head in confusion as the nun glided past. The adjutant chuckled inwardly. "These people are so ignorant." He moved toward Benjamin's quarters but was intercepted by Evelyn. She stood in the hallway, clutching a pancake. "Livia," she called out, looking him up and down, "do you still have milk pancakes? I'm hungry." The adjutant quickly mimicked Livia's soft tone. "There should be some in the kitchen. I'll have someone get them for you." Evelyn lingered. Her gaze wasn't admiring, it was clinical. "You look prettier today," she noted. "Is it cosmetics? Your hair is different, and this smile, you didn't smile like this before." The adjutant's pupils contracted. He felt as if he had run into a competitor, a fellow master of observation. "People change," he replied smoothly. "Don't you think it looks better this way?" "It looks better," Evelyn said slowly. "It just doesn't seem like you." The silence between them grew heavy until a door clicked open. Benjamin walked in, looking surprised. "What are you two doing?" The adjutant immediately shifted back into the gentle Livia. "Benjamin, I was just coming to find you." Evelyn played along, mentioning the pancakes, but the tension remained. When Benjamin asked for help with work, the adjutant leaned in, gently taking Benjamin's arm. "Since she's tired, let her rest," he purred. "I can handle anything you need on my own." Benjamin pulled his arm away, a chill running down his spine. "Don't misunderstand," Benjamin muttered. "I'm just wondering why you're being so conscientious today." The adjutant was certain he had Livia perfectly figured out. From their brief encounter, he had memorized every nuance, the way her eyes softened when mentioning Benjamin, the subtle intimacy in her tone. To him, it was obvious they were having a secret affair. His strategy was simple: stick close to Benjamin, wait for a moment of weakness, and end this tedious assassination with a poisoned blade. But reality refused to cooperate. As Benjamin processed documents with lightning speed, the disguised adjutant leaned in close, nuzzling against him to maintain the intimate act. The first time, Benjamin ignored it. The second time, he glanced over. By the third time, Benjamin slammed his pen down. "What is wrong with you today?" Benjamin frowned. "Are you deliberately trying to get in my way? Can't you be serious while we're working?" The adjutant was stunned. Had his disguise failed? No, impossible. He concluded that Benjamin must simply be a massive hypocrite. He sat back to help with the mountain of paperwork, but the door swung open. Evelyn walked in, yawning and clutching a pancake. She sat right next to the adjutant, her gaze faint but piercing. The adjutant's heart sank. With this woman watching his every move, the kill would be difficult. He waited, calculating. The room fell silent. Benjamin was engrossed in a report. Evelyn's eyes were half closed. Now. The adjutant's hand crept toward his waist, reaching for the hidden, poison-coated knife. Just one scratch would mean instant death, but then the door burst open again. Today is a nightmare, a voice cried out. The adjutant froze. Standing in the doorway was the real Livia. The air turned to ice as the two identical women stared at each other. Evelyn's eyes lit up with sudden interest. Oh, when did my Nen blade awaken? The adjutant reacted instantly. He pointed at the newcomer and screamed, "She's a fake. Benjamin, you know me, I've been here all day helpin'." Gee. The real Livia turned bright red, stammering in confusion. To settle the matter, Benjamin suggested they both manifest their Nen blades. To Livia's horror, the impostor produced an identical barrier. The adjutant then ducked behind Benjamin, whimpering, "Help, she's going to hurt me." The real Livia trembled with pure, silent rage. She had no proof, and the impostor was playing the victim perfectly. But then Benjamin turned to the real Livia and said something no one expected, "I am not Benjamin." As everyone gasped, Benjamin continued in a deep, gentle voice, "I am the you deep within your heart, the one who upholds your secret vows." He began reciting Livia's most shameful, private thoughts, secrets from the Holy Spring territory that only her second personality should know. Livia's legs gave out. She collapsed against the wall, her face burning with a mix of horror and embarrassment. The adjutant, watching this bizarre psychological breakdown, felt a surge of regret. Why had he chosen to impersonate such a mentally unstable woman? But the mission remained. As Benjamin turned his head, the adjutant lunged, sliding the poisoned knife from his sleeve and driving it toward Benjamin's chest. "Evelyn!" Benjamin roared. In a blur of motion, Evelyn teleported between them. The blade sank into her chest. "This knife is poisoned," the adjutant shrieked. "Only I can save her." Benjamin caught Evelyn as she slumped, his voice thick with fury. "Why did you block it? I could have dodged." Evelyn reached up, stroking his face weakly. "Hopefully, when the next Evelyn arrives, the work will be easier." Benjamin's jaw set. "Super double," he commanded. Evelyn's dying expression instantly shifted from tragic to ferocious. "That's outrageous." The abstract performance of Benjamin and Evelyn left the lieutenant no time for appreciation, because the real Livia was already furious. Her eyes burned with a cold, icy rage. "You," she hissed, "how dare you?" Suddenly, a barrier flickered into existence, then another and another. Translucent shields swirled and overlapped around her, their edges sharp enough to slice through steel. The adjutant took a cautious step back. This time they had gone too far. Livia was showing him exactly what it meant to be untouchable. But the adjutant did not panic. He still had a trump card. Beyond his mimicry, he was a master of martial arts with 4 deadly daggers concealed upon his person. He only needed to get close. He took a deep breath and moved, a blur of speed charging straight for Livia. Bang! He slammed into a barrier as hard as an iron plate. Blood sprayed from his nose as he staggered back, eyes wide with disbelief. Livia stared him down, her expression frozen. "Go back to your original form," she commanded. The adjutant wiped his face, his voice muffled. "I've long forgotten what I originally looked like." Livia ignored him, her gaze shifting to Evelyn, who lay on the ground bleeding profusely. Livia's voice trembled. Benjamin looked up, his tone dismissive. "Don't be sad, this person took the knife on purpose. She just wanted an excuse to be lazy." Livia blinked, stunned. Meanwhile, in Frost Town, the true Evelyn, Evelyn #1, was buried under a mountain of paperwork. Her pen flew across the pages until abruptly she stopped. "Prepare a horse for me," she told her subordinate, "and food for 4 days." The subordinate, a former chosen one of the Earth Mother Temple, was taken aback. "So suddenly, where are you going?" Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she turned her attention to a griffin rider from Stone Cliff territory. They discussed the complex requirements for a new breeding project: open spaces, elevated platforms, and specific diets. Evelyn took meticulous notes, delegating the budget and manpower with clinical efficiency. Just then, a messenger hurried in with a confidential letter from the western border. Evelyn sighed, taking the unsigned note. It warned of Archaea's movements and troop mobilizations. This was the 4th such letter, and so far the intelligence had been flawless. Evelyn tucked it away. She would inform the Baron once she reached Holy Spring City. Outside at the military exercise field, Yolia was dripping with sweat. Now serving as the town's coach, he spent his days training the regular army. But his true obsession lay elsewhere, the cemetery church. Yolia stood before the unfinished foundation, his heart heavy. While other rescued chosen ones were leisurely building their own rival temples nearby, the Church of the Spirit Garden remained a mere skeleton. Yolia could not sleep. He could not tolerate the thought of the townspeople worshipping other goddesses while his was ignored. Gritting his teeth against the exhaustion, the bishop picked up another brick and continued to build. The assassin lay sprawled on the ground like a lump of mud, his face swollen like over-fermented dough. Livia withdrew her fist, stretching her wrist with cold indifference. "Change back," she commanded. The man offered a strained, eerie smile through his ruined features. I forgot how, a long time ago." Livia didn't waste another breath. At her signal, Templar knights dragged the assassin and two other chosen ones toward the underground sanctuary, a prison designed specifically to suppress their powers. Inside the damp cell, the three captives sat in grim silence, waiting. Midnight arrived, the candles flickered out, plunging the dungeon into a suffocating blackness. Then footsteps, light, deliberate, approaching. The door swung open and a ray of light revealed a blond man swaggering into the corridor. It was Aphrodite. He sat on a wooden bench, crossed his legs, and swirled a glass of wine. "It was you," he began, his voice a low, dangerous purr, "who assassinated my friend, Baron Blackwood, wasn't it?" The captive sneered, mocking his threats, but Aphrodite simply shook a finger. "I swore to the goddess I would never torment others again," he whispered with a faint, chilling smile. "But now, I have no choice but to break my vow." He snapped his fingers. A heavy, pungent odor filled the air, a mix of cheap alcohol and sweat. Four massive, intoxicated Templar knights stepped into the light. Their muscles glistened, their eyes held a predatory, drunken glint. Aphrodite stood, opening his arms wide. "To deal with you, I chose four of the strongest, worst-drinking knights I could find. I got them so drunk. Their heads are completely empty, leaving only the alcohol." The captives turned pale. What are you doing?" the assassin stammered. Aphrodite didn't answer with words. Instead, he poured a bottle of thick, aromatic liquor over the three prisoners, soaking their clothes. He stepped back, opening the cell door wide. The four drunken giants licked their lips, drawn by the scent of the wine, and began to move forward, step by step. The dungeon echoed with a sudden, terrified scream. The next morning, a complaint reached Benjamin's desk, a violation of public morals. Apparently, a blond man had been seen leading a group of knights in a wild, midnight dance through the streets. By that afternoon, a new member joined the labor brigade. Aphrodite, wearing a straw hat and clutching a broom, swept the streets in protest. "This is unfair," he cried to the heavens. "I obtained first-hand intelligence. I want to appeal." Benjamin simply watched him, expressionless. "One thing at a time, Aphrodite. You're here for the dancing." Gus stared at the intelligence report in his hand, his brow furrowed so deeply it could trap a fly. His rugged face was filled with suspicion, as if he held not a piece of paper but a detonating tag ready to explode at any moment. Opposite him, Benjamin calmly sipped his tea. "As an ally," he asked, "would I lie to you?" Gus's gaze didn't waver. "It's hard to say." In truth, Benjamin's intelligence was ironclad. He hadn't relied on unreliable drunkards. Instead, he had used his telekinetic mind blade to probe prisoners. By sensing the emotional fluctuations in their words, he could perfectly distinguish truth from deception. "Okay," Gus finally grunted, putting the papers away. "Then I trust you." Gus, the seasoned commander-in-chief, prepared to head to the front lines to draw the enemy's fire, while Benjamin remained behind in Holy Spring City to serve as a symbol of morale. Several days later, in a secluded valley on the eastern border, Walter lay hidden in the brush. Below him, a long supply convoy from the Iron Rock territory moved warily along the mountain road. "Percival," Walter whispered, "have you made up your mind?" Percival leaned against a rock, his expression a mask of conflict. He had been raised to believe the Pale Church was justice incarnate, but Benjamin's arrival had shattered that illusion. He saw Th. At Holy Spring City was better now, the suffering had lessened. While he still struggled with his faith, his hatred for the villainous Sylvie was the final straw. "I've made up my mind," Percival said firmly. "Let's do it." The ambush was swift and brutal. Within 15 minutes, the convoy was decimated, provisions burned, and supplies looted. Walter stood by the soaring flames, waiting for the news to reach Sylvie. When it did, Sylvie was already frustrated by Gus's impregnable defenses. Realizing he could not win this war of attrition and receiving a mysterious, urgent summons from headquarters, Sylvie ground his teeth and ordered a retreat. But victory was soured by a grim discovery back at the city. Benjamin stood in a cell in the underground sanctuary, his face pale with fury. 3 corpses lay on the floor, disemboweled. The enemy adjutant had murdered his own comrades, using their mutilated bodies as bait to lure the guards into opening the door. The adjutant had escaped. "That's so stupid," Reinaldo roared, arriving at the scene, utterly incompetent. As Reinaldo berated the trembling guards, Benjamin looked into the empty cell, realizing the true depth of the madness they were up against. Ever since the lieutenant's daring escape, Livia and Aphrodite had become Benjamin's permanent shadows. They followed him everywhere. When he sat, they stood. When he ate, they watched the perimeter. When he tried to use the restroom, Benjamin finally snapped. "Can you guys stop this?" "No," Aphrodite replied, his expression as rigid as a stone gargoyle. He reminded Benjamin that their enemy was a master of stealth who had hidden his true strength. Livia nodded in grim agreement, whispering that anyone could be replaced, even those she trusted most. Benjamin sighed, trying to reason with them. "He has already left Holy Spring territory. I found him using my Nen blade." For a full day, Benjamin had extended his mental reach across the entire land, confirming the lieutenant and Sylvie had retreated to the east. But Livia wasn't convinced. "What if your psychic blade was tricked?" she challenged. Benjamin looked into her earnest eyes and asked what would happen if he had been fooled. Her answer was simple: "Then we will continue to watch over you." The retreat of the enemy was a mystery. Benjamin and Barren guys had set a trap, expecting a desperate gamble, but the Crusaders simply vanished. Benjamin suspected trouble back in the east had forced their hand. For now, the war was over. Guys was eager to return home, planning to use this peace to develop rail vehicles and train a force that would one day make the religious zealots kneel. "You look like a great general, Barren," Benjamin remarked with a smile. Guys looked toward the horizon, his gaze softening. "I just want to support Elena's wish for peace." He then turned to Benjamin with sudden sincerity. "Blackwood, thank you for saving my wife. My intuition tells me that without you, help never would have come." Meanwhile, Livia visited a quiet room where a broken figure huddled in the corner. It was Celia, once the ambitious princess of the heroic squad, now reduced to the mind of a child. Livia spoke to her daily, sharing news of the war and Benjamin, usually receiving only a blank stare in return. But today was different. "Don't you want to catch up?" a voice suddenly rang out. Livia froze. Celia was looking at her, but the emptiness was gone. A cold, seductive light danced in her eyes. It wasn't Celia speaking, it was the evil spirit, the goddess Anrise. "Get out of my friend's body," Livia commanded, her voice trembling with ice. The goddess leaned in, mocking Livia's hidden desires, but Livia didn't flinch. She reached out, covering Celia's mouth to silence the intruder. "I don't want to hear you using her voice for these words," Livia said firmly. Her mind was finally clear. She stood up, leaving the spirit behind. "I'm going to find Benjamin." "You don't need to come in with me. One person is fine." Benjamin's voice was steady, but it was met with immediate resistance. The evil spirit within Celia had awakened once more, and the air was thick with tension. Livia shook her head in protest, Aphrodite frowned, and even the battle-worn knights insisted it was too risky for him to be alone with her. But Benjamin remained firm. Reluctantly, they retreated, standing guard just outside the door, ready to break it down at the slightest sound of a struggle. Benjamin pushed the door open and stepped inside. The click of the latch echoed in the sudden silence. The room was deathly quiet. In the corner, Celia was not merely sitting, she was imprisoned. Specially made shackles, relics from the Upton collection, bound her limbs to a heavy chair. Her hair was a disheveled mess, but her eyes, those eyes were piercingly clear. Benjamin didn't say a word. He gestured toward a nearby chair which floated into the air and landed softly behind him. He sat facing her. For a long moment, they simply stared at one another. It was Celia who finally broke the silence with a mocking sneer. "It's rare for you to come see me. How about you help me remove these toys? They're really bothering me." Benjamin ignored the plea. "I was just thinking," he said coldly. "Should I call you Celia or Anlige?" Celia tilted her head, a playful glint in her eyes. "Celia, in this body we are inseparable. If you want to call me something else, why not enter my consciousness for a chat?" Don't try to seduce me, Benjamin snapped. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a serious tone. I want to have a real talk with you. If you've truly read my memories, you are the only person in this world who understands my past. Celia's playful mask slipped. Is this an appeasement strategy? It won't work. I know the hatred you harbor for me. It is precisely because of that hatred, Benjamin countered, that I want tea. Oh, understand you. Why do you place such importance on me? I know nothing about you. Celia grew quiet, then she whispered the truth. Because you shaped who I am today. She explained that before they met in Frost Town, she was merely an obsession, a mindless drive for the dead to replace the living. But when she accessed Benjamin's memories, she found a sense of self. Your presence shaped me, she said softly. To me, you are special. So, I'm your benefactor, Benjamin retorted bitterly, and you repay me by trying to destroy everything I value. Yes, Celia replied, her voice devoid of remorse. I want you to suffer, I want your hatred, because that is the deepest emotion I can understand. I want my existence to turn all your happiness into misfortune. Benjamin fell silent, absorbing the weight of her malice. So, he said at last, you want me to hate you, you long for my misery. Right, she whispered. Then congratulations, Benjamin said, his voice heavy with pain. You have already succeeded. Everything you've done has caused me agony. But what pains me most is that I am the one who touched your corpse in that underground facility. I am the one who created you. Celia closed her eyes contentedly, a small, cruel smile appearing on her lips. I understand, she breathed, and for that, I extend my sincere gratitude. In Frosttown, if you want to know who the veterans are, just ask one question. What is the hardest job around here? Newcomers might guess construction, but anyone who has survived a month will tell you, miner. Carrie used to be a miner, living like a mole, never seeing the sun. He thought that was as hard as life could get. But everything changed the day his friend Tom dragged him into the mountains to hunt medicinal herbs for the promise of half a sheep. They didn't find herbs, they found a monster. A hybrid insect taller than a man, dripping with slime. They ran for their lives, but when the creature cornered them, Carrie didn't freeze. He swung his pickaxe 10 times straight into the monster's skull until it stopped twitching. That accident caught the eye of the military. A few days later, recruiters were at his door. Carrie wanted to refuse. He had moved to Frosttown to escape war, but the benefits were too good for a poor man to ignore. Before he knew it, he was a member of the engineering corps. He was a natural. He spent his days digging trenches and building fortifications. He was even awarded a medal by the legendary champion knight Watler. For a few days, Carrie walked with a swagger, but the glory was short-lived. Real war arrived. A nightmare called the Deadborn fell from the sky. Carrie watched his squad leader die in a monster's jaws. He was promoted on the spot. He was sent to the front lines at Shieling, a place of pure chaos where griffin riders and steel chariots clashed with myths. Amidst the blood and iron, he met a sergeant named Jeffrey, who told him he's paid to fight voluntarily. Jeffrey called it a glorious war for humanity. Carrie didn't understand glory, he just wanted to go home. Finally, his replacement arrived. Carrie returned to Frosttown on a swaying railcar, wondering if his house had been given away. Instead, he was met with flowers and food, a hero's welcome that made him itch with discomfort. The town had changed. It was wealthier, busier. His friend Tom had even traded mining for a shoe store. As they drank at the tavern, Tom gossiped about the town's future, about whether the Baron would rename the city to something more grand. Walking home, tipsy and tired, Carrie saw a young laborer still piling bricks in the dark. Still working so late? Carrie asked. The boy just gave a weary smile. Carrie sighed, pitying the poor worker, until he looked up and realized something strange. Why were there suddenly several churches being built right next to his house? Alkea opened his eyes to the familiar weight of the dark. It was a habit born not of discipline, but of a deep, gnawing anxiety. Every morning, at this exact hour, a punctual voice rings out in his mind. Admit it, it sneers, you are not good enough. He sat up, donned his robe, and walked to the window. This was his ritual, to look out over the western frontier and anchor himself in his achievements. Below him, the land lay still. In just 2 years, Alkea had dismantled the old aristocracy. Those who once sabotaged him now bow, those who mocked him are silent. I feel not as good as Benjamin, the voice whispered. Alkea's lips curled into a thin smile. Your sarcasm is getting weaker, he thought, turning away to a breakfast of simple bread and dried meat. He loathed luxury, it made men lethargic. Later in the council chamber, the Grand Justice Charles approached a map with frantic excitement. Your Highness, I have the perfect plan. We conquer the royal domain, we unify the kingdom. Alkea listened to the long-winded strategy with perfunctory nods before delivering a firm no. He had no desire to touch the cesspool of the royal lands. Years ago, he wanted to be the cleaner of the kingdom, but now, someone else was already doing the dirty work and doing it well. Why steal a job as thankless as cleaning a latrine? By midday, Alkea was at the training grounds. He fought with a cold, practical intensity. He knew he lacked his sister's superhuman strength, but he refused to be vulnerable. As he stood over a panting sparring partner, the voice returned. Look at Benjamin. He doesn't lift a finger. You have to sweat. Alkea simply tossed his sword aside, speechless. The afternoon brought an elegant envoy from the Silver Empire. The elf offered formal apologies for the tainted spirits, the wild tribes that had plagued the land, insisting they did not represent the empire. After concluding a trade deal for grain and minerals, she leaned in, mentioning the popular pamphlets about the 7KN. Ites of Light, and a new story about a blanket hero. Let her continue, his inner voice urged, piqued by the gossip. But Alkea remained stoic. I have absolutely no interest in this, he replied. That night, as he lay back in the silence of his room, the voice was quiet. Perhaps it was tired, or perhaps for today Alkea had finally done enough. He closed his eyes and let the world fade away.